Have you ever wondered who wrote your name before you were born? Before breath touched your lungs, before stars learned to burn, there was a page, not of ink, but of light. They called it the Book of Destiny. It was said to rest beyond the seventh sky beneath the throne where the first angels once knelt in silence. There, in the hush of eternity, they wrote the stories of every soul. Not with words, but with obedience. Each letter shone like a pulse of divine will, each pause like a mercy withheld for a time. But not all pages stayed where heaven placed them. Some were scattered, carried by winds no one could see, hidden in sands that remembered creation. And one night, 1,000 years after prophets had fallen silent, a man found what should not have been found. His hands trembled as he brushed away the dust, revealing lines that shimmered like veins of moonlight. The pages whispered his name, not in sound but in knowing, and from that moment his sleep was never peaceful again. Close your eyes. Let the world fade. Listen as the forgotten pages turn once more. If you're still here, perhaps this story was meant for you. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. And if your heart feels called, press like and subscribe so the next untold chapter finds you. It began on a night when even the stars refused to speak. The sky hung low, a wounded dome trembling with secrets, and the desert stretched outward like an ocean of forgotten prayers. There were no travelers, no torches, no footprints to prove that men still remembered God's name. Only silence, vast and ancient, moving like a tide beneath the moon. And then it happened, a sound not meant for mortal ears, the kind of sound that could bend time. It wasn't thunder, nor wind, nor the cry of an angel's wing, but something between them, a sigh from heaven itself. For an instant the sands glowed, a soft radiance rippled across the dunes, and the air thickened with light that didn't burn but hummed like remembrance. From the highest of unseen realms, something fell. Not a star, not fire, but pages, but a weightless, shimmering, alive. Each page carried words the world had forgotten how to read. They did not bear ink. They bore command. Each symbol pulsed with divine order. What had been, what would be, what could never change. The angels above watched them fall with trembling hearts. They were not meant to. The book was not theirs to lose. Yet the decree had been written before they had breath, that one night the pages would descend and men would find what was never meant to be found. Far below, in a land of salt and silence, a man dreamed of thunder without sound. His name was not known to the world, but heaven had whispered it long before he was born. He was a keeper of ruins, one who watched the bones of fallen cities and prayed they might speak again. He lived among the broken pillars of a forgotten empire where once scholars had charted the stars and recited the names of angels until dawn. That night his dreams tore open. He saw himself walking through a field of night. No ground beneath him, no sky above, only the feeling that he had been called. Ahead, something gleamed, a scroll made of light, floating in air that shimmered like silver breath. When he reached for it, his pulse vanished. The wind stopped, and in that stillness a voice, so faint it could have been memory, spoke through him, not to him. Everything that was and everything that shall be was written in the beginning. He woke up with sand in his mouth and tears on his face. The wind had shifted. Outside his tent, the air trembled as though the earth itself remembered something divine. When he stepped out, the horizon burned pale, not with fire, but with the soft luminescence of dawn breaking from nowhere. There, half buried beneath the dunes, he saw them. Pages, not parchment, not clay, not metal, but something that breathed light like living skin. They were folded, tangled with wind, their edges humming faintly as if alive. When he touched the first one, the light within it dimmed, as though acknowledging him. He fell to his knees, not from fear, but recognition. because the moment his hand met that page, he remembered things he had never lived. He saw empires rise and vanish in dust. He heard the laughter of angels before their fall. He saw oceans born from tears, mountains lifted by command, and the first word that ever existed, spoken not into air, but into being. His heart could not contain what it saw. The visions folded upon him like waves, drowning his sense of time. When at last he could breathe again, he looked down and saw that the page he held no longer glowed. It had gone still, as though it had found its reader. In that silence, the desert shifted again. Something unseen moved far above, like wings brushing against eternity. The man looked to the sky and whispered, "I have seen the words that bind the world." But the wind answered not with comfort, only a sigh, the kind that carries both mercy and warning. From the unseen heights the angels watched. They could not descend. The decree forbade it. For every letter written in the book carried its own guard. Each symbol was alive, each word an oath. To touch them without command was to unwrite one's own place in existence. And yet, the pages had fallen. The decree had been fulfilled. What was meant to stay sealed had entered the hands of clay. The man gathered them in silence, his tent filled with light so soft that shadows forgot how to exist. He wrapped the pages in cloth and placed them within a jar of ancient stone. But the words within whispered still, not to his ears, but to his heart. Sleep would no longer come easily to him. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw rivers turning backward, stars rewriting their paths, children yet unborn calling his name. The book had chosen its witness, and though he did not know it yet, heaven and earth would never be the same. Outside the wind rose again, but it was not wind, it was wings, and in the distance, where the horizon met the void, a faint glow trembled like a wound reopening. That was the night the pages fell, and destiny began to remember itself. When dawn rose, it came without warmth. The sun hung over the dunes like a weary eye, its light thin, as though afraid to touch what the night had revealed. The man, still trembling, his hands covered in the dust of radiance, sat before the sealed jar. The pages no longer glowed, but something beneath them pulsed, a heartbeat too slow for flesh, too deep for sound. He whispered the name of God softly, the way prophets once did, when words alone could tear the veil between seen and unseen. But the air answered him with silence, a silence so complete that it became a presence. It was then he realized silence was not the absence of voice, it was the voice itself. He rose and walked beyond the dunes to where the wind carved slow-moving shapes in the sand. Each step felt older than the last, as though the ground beneath him remembered his coming long before his birth. There, at the heart of the hollow, lay a single page that had not dimmed. It floated, turning slowly as if it were breathing. He fell to his knees again. The air grew heavy, the horizon blurred, and from within the sand, not above, not around, but beneath, something began to speak. Dust remembers the touch of angels. The words did not come as sound. They arrived like tremors beneath the ribs, vibrating through bone and blood. He covered his ears, but they were not heard there. The voice was inside him now, reciting what the page refused to show. Visions returned, clearer this time. He saw a realm made of light and order. Thousands of beings kneeling in a circle, each holding a pen of flame. In the center, upon an altar, not made of stone but of silence, rested a book too bright to behold. And one by one the angels approached, each writing upon its pages a decree. E of creation, the first dawn, the first rain, the first human breath. But among them stood one who wrote nothing. He watched, his hands trembling, as the others inscribed obedience into eternity. When the final line was complete, that angel, nameless now, stepped forward and whispered, "If every fate is written, what becomes of faith?" and for the first time since the beginning, heaven hesitated. The man gasped. His heart stuttered. The page before him darkened as though burned by invisible fire, and the voice from beneath the sand spoke again. Softer now, almost kind. That was the question that tore the sky. He felt tears slide down his face. He did not understand the words, yet they carved themselves into his memory as though they were his own. He reached for the floating page, and the moment his fingers brushed its edge, it vanished, dissolved into grains of light that fell into his skin. A mark appeared there, faint and gold, like a script half written. The wind began to hum. The dunes shifted in circular patterns around him. It was not mere wind, it was breath. Something vast exhaled, and the earth seemed to rise and fall with it. The man fell to his face, pressing his forehead into the sand, whispering prayers he did not know he knew. He begged for mercy, but mercy was already written. When he opened his eyes again, the jar back at his tent was trembling. He hurried toward it, his heart racing as though chased by eternity itself. The cloth within had unfurled on its own, and the once darkened pages now shimmered faintly, each line like veins filled with living gold. They were rearranging themselves, folding into a pattern that looked like a gate, not drawn, formed. And in the air above it, faint as candle smoke, a doorway appeared, invisible yet undeniable, vibrating at the edge of sight. He could hear the voice again, nearer now, no longer beneath the sand but within the wind itself. Every soul must read its line before it sleeps forever. He fell back, trembling. His shadow flickered in the light of something unseen, and for a moment he saw the outline of wings where there were none. The sound that followed was neither thunder nor wind, but the sound of eternity inhaling. The man cried out, "Why me?" And from the unseen came the answer, "Because you still believe." He wept until the desert blurred into salt. When his tears struck the pages, they vanished, absorbed like rain into the earth. And the ground beneath him pulsed once, twice, as though a heartbeat buried deep beneath the world had awakened. Night returned too soon that day. The horizon burned violet. The stars refused to blink. From the dunes beyond his tent, something shone, faint and rhythmic, like a lantern being carried through fog. He followed, though his legs shook with every step. What he found there would haunt the rest of his days. Half buried in the sand was a shape like a man, but not made of flesh. Its body shimmered like molten glass, fractured with lines of light. It lay face down as if fallen from an impossible height, and upon its back were carved the same letters that glowed within the book. The man knelt beside it, whispering, "Are you alive?" The figure's mouth did not move, yet the wind answered through it. "Only in the memory of what I once was." The light within the figure dimmed, one final flicker, and then faded into dust. The man was left alone beneath the cold sky, the pages in his arms humming with quiet sorrow. He did not yet know that what had fallen before him was not a man, not an angel, but a keeper, the one who had once guarded the book. And now the book had no guard. The night stretched long, heavy with revelation. Above, heaven mourned in silence. Below, one man carried the light of eternity and could not put it down. The man did not sleep. All through the long hours, he sat beside the fallen light, watching the sand reclaim what heaven had lost. The stars drifted overhead like eyes that refused to blink. Each one seemed dimmer, as though even the heavens were grieving. He spoke softly to the wind, not knowing if it listened. "What are you?" he whispered. "And what have I done?" The silence that followed was not empty. It moved, a low hum, deep as the first pulse of creation. The air trembled, and from the sand rose a faint glow where the figure had vanished. For a moment it took form again, a shape of light bent into memory. The voice that came was softer now, fragile, as if pulled from a place beyond endings. "I am what remains of the keeper," it said. "Once I stood before the throne, holding the weight of what was written. I guarded the book when the angels slept, when time was young and faith was new. But obedience carries a cost. Even light grows weary." The man bowed his head. "Why have the pages fallen?" A pause, long, sorrowful, infinite, because men forgot what was promised. "The pages seek remembrance. They must be read, or the world will fade into its own forgetting." He felt the words like stones against his chest. "But I am no prophet," he whispered. "I am a man of dust." The light pulsed once, as if smiling. "Dust is what I remember best. Do you not know? The first breath that entered you carried his command, the same command that formed the stars. You were written before you were born." The man's tears fell onto the sand, each one swallowed by the earth as though welcomed home. He looked to the horizon. The dunes seemed to shimmer, bending and twisting like ripples across water. The air grew cold, and the keeper's voice became faint, unraveling with the wind. "When the book was sealed, I asked for one mercy, that if ever it was opened again, one among mankind would hear its cry. That one is you. The ink of destiny has bled through the veil. You must guard it now until the appointed dawn." He wanted to ask what that dawn meant, but the light was fading. "Wait," he pleaded. "Tell me your name." The keeper's glow flickered. "Names are for the living. I am the echo of obedience. But remember this." The sands began to swirl, rising around him in a spiral of silver dust. "Every destiny is written twice, once in heaven, and once in the heart that chooses." And with that, the light vanished. The dunes collapsed into stillness, leaving only the faint trace of heat, like breath after prayer. The man knelt for a long time, his body trembling between awe and sorrow. The night pressed close, vast, eternal, holy. He could feel the weight of what had been given to him, and though he did not understand its full meaning, his soul had already said yes. He returned to his tent, the jar heavy with light. The pages within whispered faintly, rearranging themselves in languages older than speech. He could not sleep, but neither could he close the jar. Each time he tried, the lid would tremble, as if the words within refused to be caged. So he sat, listening. At first, it was murmurs, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat learning to speak. But as the hours deepened, he began to hear sentences, not spoken aloud but shaped within him. "Write what you see." He took a reed and ink, though the pages themselves glowed without need of it. Yet he obeyed, and as he wrote, the words appeared not in black, but in gold. He wrote until dawn, his hand moving without command, his heart a vessel. And when the first light touched the horizon, the glow within the jar dimmed at last, as though satisfied. He looked upon the pages he had written and saw that they were not mere symbols. They were living prayers. They spoke of beginnings and endings, of mercy that preceded creation, of light that would one day return. He could feel his own name among them, though it was not written as sound but as memory. The desert was still when he stepped outside. Only the wind moved, gentle, reverent, as though carrying his breath to places unseen. He felt no pride, only weight. He knew that whatever task had begun this night would not end in his lifetime. As the sun rose, something shimmered far away, a faint glint upon a dune. He thought it might be another page, but when he approached, he found instead a single feather. Translucent, fragile, shaped like light, turned solid. He picked it up, and the air whispered through it. Every story written in the book must be lived to be fulfilled. He closed his eyes and pressed the feather to his chest. For the first time, he felt the truth settle in him like dawn over water. That destiny was not something one read, but something one became. He walked back toward his tent, the feather in his hand, the jar beneath his arm. The wind followed him like prayer. Behind him, the sand swallowed the place where the keeper had fallen. The world looked the same, but heaven was watching differently now. quieter, closer, and somewhere beyond sight, in the realm of light where pages are born, the book of destiny stirred, aware once more of its reader upon the earth. He began to wander. Days passed without names. Nights melted into one another like ink on a forgotten page. The desert, which had always been endless, now felt alive, as if watching him. Sometimes he thought he could hear whispers beneath the wind, syllables not spoken, but remembered. The jar at his side trembled softly at dawn, as though the light itself woke it. He no longer slept as men do. When his eyes closed, he drifted through visions, places and faces that could not be his, yet felt like memories long buried in his soul. He saw the sky before time began, unbroken, unscarred. He saw angels as vast as galaxies, their wings made of thought, their faces hidden by obedience. He saw the ink of creation itself spill into the void like dawn across water. And every time he woke, his tears were already drying upon his face. By the seventh night he reached a valley carved by wind, a hollow of glass-like sand. The air there shimmered with heat, but not the heat of sun, the heat of memory. He knelt upon the glass and felt beneath it the echo of something sleeping. There he prayed, not to be freed, but to understand. "Lord of what was written," he whispered, "why show me what I cannot bear?" The wind shifted, and from the hollow a voice rose, not thunder this time, but the trembling echo of a human breath carried across eternity. "Because you were there when it was first written." He froze. The sand beneath his knees vibrated like a pulse. He looked up, and the horizon wavered, bending, folding, opening like a curtain. For a moment he saw beyond the veil. It was not a vision, it was a memory. He stood upon a plain of light, surrounded by those who were not yet angels, but not yet men. Spirits shaped in obedience, glowing like words half-spoken. In their midst stood a figure whose face was veiled by radiance. The voice from that figure filled everything, and yet it was gentle, like rain that did not fall, only waited. Who among you remembers the promise? The spirits bowed, each one silent. And then, from the edge of that gathering, a single spark stepped forward. "I will remember," it said. The light around it deepened, folding into the shape of a man's soul. That spark was him. Long before clay and breath, long before the weight of the world. He fell to the ground in the present, weeping. The sand beneath him turned silver where his tears fell. The pages in the jar began to hum again, their light breaking through the seal like roots breaking through stone. He reached for them, and they rose into the air, circling him like orbiting moons. Each page unfolded, showing not words, but images. A prophet standing by a river, his hands stained with ink, a child holding a broken star, a city built on promises and lies, a woman kneeling beneath rain that never reached the ground. These were not stories. They were memories waiting to be lived. He understood then that the book of destiny was not a single story, but all stories, woven together like threads of one divine tapestry. And he, for reasons beyond his understanding, had been chosen to witness their return. The voice came again, now softer, closer. "You were meant to remember what others forgot. You are not the first prophet, but the last to dream of the first light." He bowed his head. "I am not worthy." "None are," the voice replied. "That is why they are chosen." The wind grew colder, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. Rain that would never touch this land. He could feel the eyes of the unseen upon him, angels watching from between realms, their sorrow mingled with awe. He gathered the pages once more, his hands trembling. When he held them close to his heart, they pulsed once, and then, for the first time, they spoke through his breath. "Write what heaven cannot keep." He took up his reed and ink again, but this time the pages themselves guided his hand. His writing became smoother, not learned but remembered. He wrote until the stars dimmed, until dawn brushed the dunes with faint gold. When he finished, he found that the words upon the page were not of warning, nor command, nor prophecy. They were prayers. Each one ended with the same line, written as if in his own voice. And still, I remember the sky. He leaned back, exhausted. The horizon was quiet again, save for a single star lingering long after dawn. It flickered once, twice, then vanished. He whispered, "If remembering is my burden, then let me never forget." And from somewhere unseen the reply came. A whisper, light as breath, heavy as eternity. "So it shall be, written." The wind rose, carrying his words toward the heavens, and for a moment he thought he could hear them being written back. When the morning came, he saw smoke on the horizon. At first, he thought it was storm clouds rising from the sea of sand, but as he walked closer, he saw shapes. Towers half buried, domes cracked open like hollow eggs, streets carved in forgotten stone. It was a city, sleeping beneath centuries of dust, its bones still breathing heat from a sun that no longer recognized it. He felt something stir within the jar. The pages rustled faintly as though recognizing this place. When he stepped across the fallen gate, the air itself seemed to bow. A slow, invisible sigh. The wind did not move through these ruins. It remembered them. In the center of the city stood a column of white marble, veined with gold. Upon it was carved a circle, incomplete, its edge crumbled. Beneath it lay an inscription in a language that no human tongue had spoken for 1,000 generations. But he understood it. He did not know how, only that he did. "We built this city to touch the stars, and when heaven turned its face away, we built higher." He touched the words with trembling fingers. The stone was cold, but beneath the surface he felt a thrum, like the faint echo of heartbeats that refused to die. He wandered through the streets, past arches once crowned with lanterns, past wells filled with dust. Every shadow felt alive, every silence too deliberate. He began to sense that the city itself was listening, waiting for something it had been promised long ago. At the edge of the great plaza he saw a statue half broken, its face eroded by wind. But its eyes, what remained of them, seemed to follow him. He approached, and beneath the statue's hand lay another page, thin as light, half buried in sand. When he lifted it, the city exhaled. A whisper rippled through the ruins. Not wind, not sound, but something older. He felt it crawl into his bones. The world around him blurred, and suddenly he was not in the ruins anymore. He was inside the city as it once had been. The streets were alive with light. The towers glowed with sacred fire. Music floated through the air like breath between prayers. Men and women dressed in white silk walked among fountains that poured not water, but flame that did not burn. Above them, vast domes shimmered with stars painted in liquid gold. A mirror, all of the real heavens they sought to surpass. And at the city's heart stood a great tower, higher than any mountain wrapped in clouds. At its peak, a light blazed that could be seen from the farthest deserts. The people called it the Ladder of Ascension. They said it was the place where man would one day meet God face to face. But in the crowd below, a voice whispered, one that should have never been heard. "If heaven is silent, build your own heaven." The words spread like smoke, unseen but suffocating. Pride dressed itself as devotion. They began to write their own decrees, carving them into the walls of the tower. Each word glowed briefly, then sank into stone as though the city itself was swallowing them. He saw priests kneeling before fire that spoke not truth, but their reflection. He saw kings declaring themselves chosen, while angels stood at the edge of the sky and turned away in sorrow. The tower rose higher, and with each new level the stars above dimmed, one by one. Then he heard the sound. The same sound that once split the desert sky, that sacred sigh, that tremor of remembrance. Only now it came not from heaven, but from beneath the tower. The city shook. The light of its fountains turned black. The people looked upward, but heaven did not answer. The ground cracked. The tower split from its base to its crown, and from within it came a voice not divine, not human, a voice that had been trapped beneath the weight of their own ambition.
You cannot write destiny.
You can only read what was written. The tower folded in on itself like parchment burning from within. The sound of its fall was not thunder. It was silence breaking. The vision ended. He was back in the ruins, breathless, the page trembling in his hand. Its light faded as though it had finished speaking. He sank to his knees, pressing his forehead to the sand, whispering, "They built to reach you," and lost themselves in the echo. The wind circled him softly, carrying ash and memory. The city was gone again. Quiet, broken, buried beneath time. But the lesson burned within him like an ember that refused to die. He looked to the horizon, where the sun dipped low, and in the fading light he saw movement. Faint, spectral, like reflections of what once was. For a heartbeat, he saw them. The people of the lost city walking through their streets of dust, repeating the same prayer over and over, voices hollow but unending. "Remember us, remember us, remember us." He watched until the last whisper faded. Then he rose, clutching the dimmed page to his chest. He understood now why he had been chosen to remember. Not because he was holy, but because memory was mercy. For even ruins deserve to be known. He turned back toward the desert, the sky burning with the last light of day. Behind him, the city that once dreamed of touching God slept once more beneath the sand. Only the faintest echo remained, a heartbeat that was not his own, pulsing deep beneath the earth, waiting for the day it would be remembered again. That night, the desert was darker than it had ever been. No stars, no moon. Even the horizon where earth kissed heaven seemed to have vanished. The prophet sat by the dying flame of his lamp, his hand still resting upon the dimmed page, and he felt for the first time what it meant for creation to forget its own light. The air was cold, not with the chill of night, but with the ache of absence. It was as if the world had been unspoken for a moment, left in the silence between breaths. The jar beside him, which once pulsed with divine rhythm, lay still. No whisper, no hum, just stillness. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Lord, have you withdrawn?" And in that vast, wordless quiet, something answered. Not with voice, but with vision. He saw the sky before the stars, a deep, perfect void waiting to be filled. Then one spark, then another,
Then 1,000.
each born not of fire, but of remembrance. They were not burning. They were remembering what light felt like, and so light was born again. But in the center of that celestial ocean, one star faltered. It flickered, dimmed, and began to fall. Its descent tore a thread through heaven, and from that tear poured forgetfulness, a shadow that had no shape, only hunger. He saw angels weep. He saw the book of destiny tremble, its pages fluttering as if in pain. One line, written at the dawn of time, began to blur. Its letters faded, like memory slipping from the mind of the divine. Then he saw himself, not as a man, but as a shadow kneeling before a blank page. His hands were empty. His mouth could not form prayer. The voice whispered, "This is what happens when remembrance dies." He gasped awake. The lamp had gone out. The cold gnawed at him. The silence pressed close, heavy with meaning. He rose and looked to the sky. It was not merely dark. It was empty. No wind, no motion, no sound of the unseen. Even the sand beneath his feet felt lifeless. Then, faintly, he saw it.
A single thread of light weaving through the heavens like a fragile vein.
It pulsed weakly, as though clinging to existence. The prophet fell to his knees, whispering the names of God one after another, each name a trembling plea. Ya Rahman.
Ya Rahim, Ya Nur.
At the last name, light, the thread brightened. Barely, but enough. And in that moment, he understood. The stars had not vanished. They had only forgotten who they were. He closed his eyes and began to recite verses he did not remember learning. They poured from him like water from an ancient well, verses of creation, of mercy, of remembrance.
As each word left his lips, another point of light returned to the sky.
The stars did not blaze back all at once. They returned like children, recognizing a mother's voice after being lost too long. Slowly, tenderly, they remembered their glow. He lifted his face to them, tears tracing lines through the dust.
Even light needs to be reminded, he whispered.
The desert breathed again. The wind returned, gentle and cool, carrying with it the faint hum of the unseen. The song that had always existed, too vast for mortal ears. The jar began to tremble once more. Its glow returned, soft and golden. He placed his hand over it and felt a pulse, steady, alive. The book had awakened again. He heard the faintest voice, a thread woven through the sound of the night. What fades can be written again, what forgets can remember. He sat in silence, watching the stars flicker in patterns he almost recognized. Constellations shaped like letters, like words forming across the sky. They were not random, they were writing. Each cluster of light formed verses, not in human language, but in the pure rhythm of divine remembrance. The sky itself had become a page, the stars its ink. He realized then that every act of remembrance, every prayer whispered into silence, every tear shed in faith, was rewriting creation's memory of God. The Book of Destiny was not merely a record. It was alive because belief was alive. And so he prayed not for power, not for clarity, but for constancy, that the hearts of those who would come after him would not forget their origin. He stayed there until dawn, kneeling in the sand as the first light kissed the dunes. The world had remembered itself, but one star, the fallen one, did not return. Its absence hung like a wound in the heavens. He looked toward that empty space and whispered, "The story isn't finished yet, is it?" The voice within the jar, faint and weary, replied, "No, the fallen one still writes." He bowed his head. He understood now that remembrance was not enough. There must also be return. He gathered his things in silence. The sun climbed slowly and gold over the horizon, warming the dunes. The book hummed gently in his arms, as if breathing once more. He began to walk toward the shadowed west, toward the place where the fallen star had gone, where memory and mercy would meet again. And as he walked, the wind followed, carrying his footsteps into legend. For 3 days he walked west. No path, no sign, only the endless curve of the desert where sky met sand in silence. The heat was merciless by day, the cold endless by night. Yet he kept walking, drawn by something deeper than sight, a pull that felt older than breath itself. The jar at his side whispered faintly, its pages restless, as if longing to return to what had fallen. By the 4th dawn, he reached the edge of a vast ravine, a wound upon the earth, black and wide as eternity. The air above it shimmered, not from heat, but from grief. It was as if the ground remembered the fire that once struck it. He knew without reason that this was the place, the wound where the fallen star had entered the world. He knelt at the edge. The sand here was glass, melted, fused by celestial flame. Beneath its surface, faint veins of light pulsed, flickering weakly like embers refusing to die. He placed his hand upon it. The moment he did, the earth exhaled. A wind rose from the depths, carrying with it the faint scent of iron and rain, the smell of the sky when it bleeds. Then came the whisper, not from the jar, not from above, but from below. I remember the light, but it no longer remembers me. The prophet's heart froze. He leaned forward, his breath shallow.
Who speaks?
The voice sighed. It was not human, yet not distant either. The voice of something that had once known eternity and now bore the weight of time. I was among them, the keepers of the first light. We were formed from command by to burn without doubt, to obey without question. But there came a silence in the heavens, a pause between decrees.
And in that silence, I thought,
The air trembled with the last word. It was not pride in the voice, it was sorrow, deep and unending. Thought is dangerous for those made of obedience. I wondered if I was flame or faith, if I glowed because he willed it, or because I loved the light itself.
and in that wondering I dimmed. One thought, that was all it took. I fell not for rebellion.
But for remembering myself. The prophet's tears fell silently into the glass sand. The voice continued, each word cracking with the strain of centuries. When I fell, I tore a wound through the sky,
It bled light?
and the angels wept not for my fall, but for the silence that followed. For the first time since the beginning, heaven had lost a sound. He whispered, "You were the sound. I was the first note, the echo that gave creation its rhythm." When I fell, the music stopped. The prophet bowed his head. The desert wind circled him slowly, carrying with it faint strains of melody, broken, incomplete, like a memory of song. "Why have you called me here?" he asked. The voice paused. "Because you remember what the heavens forgot, the book that breathes beside you. It is not merely a record of fate. It is a bridge between remembering and returning. And you, child of dust, are the only one who still listens." He opened the jar, and the pages lifted into the air. Their light met the wind, scattering into spirals of gold and silver. The ground beneath him pulsed brighter, as if awakening.
Can the fallen rise again?
He asked softly. "Rise?" The voice replied. "No, but we can be remembered."
And remembrance is a kind of return.
The prophet nodded. His eyes glistened with both mercy and pain. "Then I will remember you." The earth shuddered. A single spark, faint, trembling, rose from the depths of the ravine. It hovered before him, flickering weakly, its glow like the last breath of a dying flame. He cupped it in his hands. The spark pulsed once, then again, and with each beat he heard faint whispers, fragments of divine music, returning to itself. "Do you hear it?" the voice asked. "Yes," he said. "It sounds like forgiveness." The spark brightened. For a moment, it painted his face with light, tracing the outlines of every sorrow and every prayer that had ever passed through him. And then, as gently as it had come, it settled into his chest. He gasped. His heart blazed like dawn. But it was not fire. It was memory.
Visions unfolded behind his eyes. The moment of the fall, the silence of heaven, the grief of the angels.
But now, for the first time, he saw something else, a promise hidden within the loss. When the first star fell, heaven had whispered, "Even absence shall serve the light." He rose to his feet, trembling. The ravine was silent again, the wind calm. The glass beneath his feet no longer glowed, yet it felt alive as if breathing with him. He whispered into the darkness, "Your name will not be forgotten." And the faintest echo replied, "Nor will yours." He sealed the jar once more. The pages within now pulsed brighter than before, as though the fallen one's memory had returned to them. The book hummed with a new resonance, a sound like healing. He turned from the ravine, walking back into the endless desert. Behind him, the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, soft, slow, golden. For the first time since the beginning of his journey, the prophet smiled, because in that dawn he saw what the heavens had once known, that every fall, every silence, every shadow was just another way for the light to find its way home. He walked until the dunes gave way to stone, and the stone to valleys of salt. The horizon shimmered like a wound, still bleeding light. Somewhere ahead, a faint glimmer flickered, not sunlight, not reflection, but something alive. It was as if the desert itself remembered where the river once ran. He followed the shimmer for days. The wind grew colder, sharper. At dusk, on the seventh day, he found it. A narrow canyon carved into the bones of the earth, where a stream of molten silver ran through the dark. It was not water. It was light. The same light that burned within stars, now flowing like a river that had forgotten heaven. He knelt beside it, trembling. The air smelled of lightning and prayer. The current whispered in 1,000 voices, a faint, layered, woven into one. Each sound felt like a verse, like something once recited by angels, long before men learned to speak. He cupped his hand into the current. It was warm but did not burn. The moment the light touched his skin, visions flooded him again, not of what was, but of what had been undone. He saw the fallen stars descent again, the sky splitting, the music stopping. But this time he saw what happened afterward. The river of fire had poured from the wound in the heavens, carrying fragments of divine melody into the earth. It had cooled, turned silver, and slept beneath stone for ages, waiting for one who could remember the song. The prophet whispered, "Is this the song you lost?" The river answered not in words, but in rhythm. The light rippled, forming patterns, circles within circles, moving like breath. The sound that came from it was faint, but achingly familiar, the same hum he had heard from the book when it spoke to him for the first time. He placed the jar beside him. The pages within began to tremble. One by one, they rose into the air and hovered above the river, glowing like small moons. Their light reflected upon the current, and in that reflection the water and the words became one. The prophet understood this river was not of earth, but of remembrance. The fallen star's fire had become the river's soul. It was the light of obedience, seeking to return home. He spoke softly. "If I remember you, will the heavens remember too?" The current brightened. The air thickened with warmth, as if the world itself had drawn breath again. "And let me carry your name," he said.
Let me be the voice you lost.
The river shimmered brighter. The pages turned on their own, folding and unfolding like wings. The hum rose into melody, then into something beyond sound, a resonance that filled the desert, shaking the stones, stirring the dust. The prophet fell to his knees, overwhelmed.
His
Heart beat in rhythm with the river. For a moment he was no longer separate from it. His breath became its current. His pulse became its flow. Then, out of the brightness, he saw shapes forming in the light. Figures moving within the current. They were not angels, not men, but memories of both. Their forms wavered like smoke, their faces veiled by radiance. They reached toward him but could not touch. One of them spoke, though its mouth did not move. "We are what remains of the song. The fire remembers you because you once remembered it." He looked down at his reflection and saw not his face, but light, woven with shadow, whole yet trembling. The figure spoke again. "All creation was once a river. Each of us flowed from him, and to him all must return. But some currents were lost in silence.
That silence has a name, and it walks the earth."
The prophet's heart clenched. The silence that fell from the sky? The figure nodded, or rather, its light bowed. "The fallen one you met was only the first wound. The silence has grown since then. It drinks from hearts that forget their origin. It walks in faces that have forgotten their maker." The current darkened for a moment, rippling with sorrow. "But you," the voice continued, "were written to remember. You are the bridge between the written and the living. When you speak, remembrance awakens in what has forgotten itself." He bowed his head, tears falling into the river. Each tear became a spark that merged with the current, making it brighter. He whispered, "Then let me speak again." He lifted his face and began to recite. Not words from any scroll, not verses from memory, but sound itself, the pure vibration of faith. It rose from his chest like wind rising from the deep, weaving into the melody of the river until both became one song, the song of return. The canyon trembled, stones cracked, the current surged, glowing so fiercely that it lit the desert for miles. And as the prophet sang, the river began to rise. It climbed the walls of the canyon like a great column of light, twisting upward, upward, returning to the sky that had forgotten it. The prophet's body glowed, his eyes reflecting the brightness of creation itself. When the light reached the heavens, a single sound rang out. One note, clear and ancient. It was the sound the fallen star had lost. The music of obedience returned, then silence. The river was gone. The canyon lay empty, its floor glistening with faint silver dust. The book beside him was still, but within his heart the hum remained. A small, steady rhythm, pulsing in time with the heartbeat of the world. He whispered, "The fire is remembered." The wind sighed in reply, carrying the words toward the unseen. He closed the jar once more, the pages faintly glowing through the clay. And as night fell, he looked up and saw that the missing star had flickered once more, faint and small, but alive. The prophet smiled. He had not restored the heavens, only reminded them how to listen.
And sometimes that was enough.
When morning came, it came gently, not as command but as mercy. The dunes were still, as if the world itself had stopped to listen. The prophet awoke beside the empty canyon, the silver dust of the vanished river clinging to his hands like blessing. For the first time since his journey began, he felt something inside him shift. Not peace, but a tenderness that hurt. He rose and looked east. The horizon was pale, the light slow and soft as breath. The wind moved through the sand like a memory returning to bone. And in that silence, he heard something faint. The echo of water. It was impossible. There had been no water here for centuries. Yet he followed the sound. The path led him across ridges of stone, through valleys where the air shimmered with heat. The sound grew stronger. It was not the roar of rivers nor the trickle of streams. It was steady, rhythmic, alive. When he crested the last hill, he saw it, a single pool of clear water nestled in the hollow of the desert. The pool was no wider than his shadow, yet the surface glowed faintly as if remembering the light that once ran as a river. He knelt, and when he gazed into it, he saw not his reflection, but clouds, dark and heavy, swelling with rain. He whispered, "Is this the dream of the fire?" The pool rippled once as if nodding. He dipped his hands into it, and the moment the water touched his skin, he felt the sky shift above him. The air grew cool. The smell of rain filled the world. The wind began to hum again. Not the song of angels this time, but the slow melody of earth longing for mercy. He closed his eyes. The water vibrated in his palms. "Let it fall," he said softly. The first drop struck the sand beside him. Warm, bright, tasting faintly of metal and dawn. Then another and another. The prophet lifted his face to the sky. It was not ordinary rain. Each drop carried light within it, faint but living, as though the heavens themselves were weeping memory back into the earth. The dunes glimmered. The air shimmered. For the first time in centuries, the desert smelled of life. He laughed quietly through his tears. "You remember now," he whispered to the clouds. "Even silence can bloom." The book at his side began to hum once more. The jar glowed softly, pulsing in rhythm with the rain. The pages within turned themselves, fluttering as if caught in a gentle wind from nowhere. Then, as the rain fell harder, he saw them. Figures moving between the dunes, their outlines made of light and water, shimmering in the storm. They were not angels, not men, cadiques, but echoes of both, reborn from memory. The fallen star's fire, the river's song, the keeper's whisper, all of them returning, shaped by mercy. They approached him slowly, surrounding him in silence. Each figure placed a hand over their chest, where their hearts would have been, and bowed. Their light flickered once, then steadied. He felt no fear. He bowed in return. "What are you?" he asked. One of them, its voice soft as wind over water, replied, "We are the fragments of remembrance. What you restored through mercy, we now carry as rain. Wherever we fall, the forgotten will remember." As the rain continued, the figures dissolved, becoming droplets, merging with the storm, carried by wind to every horizon. The prophet stood alone once more, soaked in silver light. He fell to his knees, pressing his forehead to the wet sand. The ground beneath him pulsed gently, as though breathing. He realized then that the desert was not barren. It had only been waiting for someone to remember the sound of water. He whispered, "O Lord, even the dust knows how to wait for you." The rain began to ease. The light dimmed, the air filled with the scent of new life. Faint grass, unseen but near. He rose slowly, the jar glowing steady at his side. The book's hum softened into stillness, content. Above him the clouds parted.
A single shaft of light broke through, falling upon the pool.
In its reflection he saw again the fallen star, not burning, not weeping, but whole, steady, bright, he understood. The light had not returned to the sky. The sky had descended to meet the earth. He whispered into the wind, "The heavens have remembered the ground," and somewhere far away, perhaps beyond all sight, a single page turned itself within the book of destiny, its words alive, breathing, fulfilled. The prophet gathered his things. The storm had passed, but the air still hummed with something sacred. He began to walk once more, though he did not know where his path would lead. Behind him, the rain still fell in places unseen, watering forgotten seeds, waking memories buried too long. As he walked, the clouds thinned, revealing the faint shimmer of stars, each one bright, alive, remembering its purpose. The missing one glowed faintly again, steady now as if healed. He looked once more toward the sky and smiled. The story is still being written. Tea. He whined, carried his words away, scattering them like petals into the endless night. And the desert, the same desert that had never known water, began to dream again. The prophet walked until the desert thinned into stone and the wind carried the scent of myrrh. The dunes gave way to low hills, pale and cracked, their edges shimmering as if dust remembered dew. Beyond them, in the hollow between mountains, something impossible awaited. A garden. It was not lush like the gardens of men, nor wild like those of the unseen. Its trees were pale, their leaves thin as silver, their roots drinking light instead of water. Every branch trembled as if in prayer. Between them ran a stream no wider than a thread, and where it touched the stones, the earth glowed faintly, soft, blue, living. The prophet stood at its edge, his breath caught between awe and sorrow. He knew without question that this was not of earth. This was the place where silence came to bloom. He set down the jar beside him. The pages inside shifted restlessly, whispering in languages too old for sound. One rose, the first page ever written, its surface faintly worn, its light trembling. It turned itself toward the garden. The prophet whispered, "Is this where you began?" The page fluttered once as if in answer. Then the air around him shifted, the way air does before a storm or a revelation. The wind stilled. The trees stopped moving. Even the light seemed to hold its breath. From the center of the garden came a sound, not thunder, not wind, not voice. It was the soft fall of wings. He looked up. An angel stood before him. Its form was neither male nor female, neither fire nor flesh. Its wings were vast, woven from the threads of forgotten prayers. Each feather shimmered faintly, as though carrying the memories of those who once believed. Its eyes held no pupil, only light, endless, weary-eyed. The prophet fell to his knees.
"Are you the keeper?"
The angel shook its head. Its wings moved slightly, scattering faint motes of light across the ground. Wherever they fell, the earth whispered, as if remembering. "I am not the keeper," the angel said softly. He fell. "I am what remains of his remembrance." Its voice carried sadness, not despair, but the kind of sorrow that comes from watching centuries pass unhealed. "You have carried the book," it continued, "and now you stand where it was first written. This garden is not of soil. It is the memory of obedience, the echo of the first breath that gave birth to faith." The prophet bowed deeply, his forehead touching the glowing ground. "Then why do you weep?" The angel turned its gaze toward the horizon. For the first time, he saw the faintest glimmer of tears fall from its eyes. Not water, but light that darkened as it fell. "Because remembrance is not peace," it said. "It is the ache of knowing what was lost." The prophet raised his head.
What did heaven lose?
The angel folded its wings slightly, and the air trembled. It was forgetful. He frowned, not understanding. "When man was made," the angel whispered, "he was given the gift of forgetting, so that forgiveness could exist. But we, the first ones, were made only to remember. We cannot forget the fall, the silence, the rebellion, the burning. We remember all things, even those too heavy to bear." Its voice wavered, softer now. "I remember the first time the light trembled. I remember when love became law. I remember when silence entered heaven." The prophet's heart ached for it. "You were made for obedience," he said. "And yet you ache like us." The angel smiled faintly, though sorrow never left its eyes. "Obedience is the highest peace when commanded, but when silence comes, obedience becomes longing." It turned toward the stream of light that wound through the garden. This river was once sung. It carried the names of every being written in the book. When the first shadow fell, its current broke. The song ceased. I remained to guard its silence. The prophet reached toward the river, letting its glow touch his hand. It was cool, not warm. It felt like touching memory itself. "Can the song be restored?" The angel closed its eyes.
Not by the heavens.
"Only by one who has walked the dust and still listens to the silence between God's words." The prophet looked down at the jar beside him. The pages within stirred again, humming faintly. He understood. The book had led him here not to witness, but to continue the song, to give remembrance of voice again. He lifted the jar. "Then teach me." The angel spread its wings, and the garden shone with brilliance. The sound that came was not melody, it was rhythm. The rhythm of breath, of creation, of life being spoken into dust. The prophet felt his chest ache as the air itself began to move through him. Each breath became a verse. Each heartbeat a line of scripture. He was not writing now, he was being written. The angel whispered, "When man remembers, the heavens heal." And in that instant, he felt every sorrow that ever lived, every prayer unanswered, every light extinguished, every silence mistaken for abandonment. And yet, woven through it all, he felt mercy. Infinite, endless, real. When the brilliance faded, the angel knelt before him. Its light dimmed, its wings folded close. "Now you have seen what only we were meant to see," it said. "But you will not fall as we did because you can forget. And through forgetting, you will forgive." The prophet's eyes glistened.
And you? What will become of you?
The angel smiled softly, its form fading at the edges. "I will rest. When you speak what you have learned, remembrance will no longer need a keeper." It placed its hand, made of light, upon his head. "Do not fear silence. It is the space where God waits to be remembered." And with that, the angel was gone. The garden dimmed, returning to stillness. Only the faint hum of the river remained. Slow, fragile, eternal. The prophet stood alone, the jar warm in his hands. Above him, a breeze stirred the air, and with it came the scent of rain again. He whispered, "The angel who could not forget has finally been remembered." The wind carried his words through the silver leaves, and the garden whispered back, "Amen." Night fell softly, over the garden. The silver trees whispered like pages turning in the wind, and the prophet sat beside the stream of light, feeling the absence of the angel like the echo of a song half remembered. The air trembled faintly, not with power, but with tenderness. It was the stillness that follows revelation, when the soul is too full for speech. He looked down at the stream. The surface shimmered faintly, though no stars reflected upon it. When he leaned closer, he saw something strange. His reflection did not move with him. It watched him, steady, knowing, alive. He whispered, "Are you me?" The reflection smiled, but its eyes were older, ancient, luminous. "No, I am what remains when remembrance becomes a mirror." The prophet drew back slightly. "What does that mean?" "You have seen light and shadow," it said. "You have walked among the ruins of silence and the rivers of fire. But all that you have seen, the keeper, the fallen one, the rain, the song, lives also within you." The book does not only record destiny, it reflects it. You are both the reader and the writer. The prophet's heart trembled. "Then who writes?" The reflection's smile softened. "He who breathes between your thoughts." The air grew still again. The stream shimmered brighter, and for a moment he saw not his own face, but 1,000 faces. Men, women, children, prophets, wanderers, all woven into one living tapestry. Each face turned slightly, each whispering the same phrase, "We remember." He watched, transfixed, as their reflections merged back into his own. He felt the weight of all creation pressed gently against his chest, not as a burden, but as belonging. He bowed his head and murmured, "Then remember."
"France is not mine alone."
The reflection nodded. "No remembrance ever is. Each soul that remembers adds a word to the unending story."
"Even silence is part of the song."
He looked down again and this time saw something else in the water. Not a face, but wings. They shimmered faintly beneath the surface, motionless, buried like an image beneath glass. The prophet reached into the stream. The moment his hand touched the light, the surface rippled and the wings stirred. Not with sound, but with memory. They began to rise. The water did not break. Instead, it folded around them like fabric made of breath. Slowly, the wings unfolded, vast, ethereal, each feather glimmering with the faint glow of starlight. He recognized them. They belonged to the angel who could not forget, but these wings were no longer burdened. Their edges gleamed with peace.
A voice, softer than a sigh, came from within them.
"Every act of remembrance sets one feather free." He fell to his knees, tears sliding silently into the stream. The wings hovered above him, then slowly descended, wrapping around his form without touch, as though embracing his soul rather than his body.
"Why do you show me this?" he asked.
"Because even angels must be remembered by those they once guarded," the voice replied. "And because in you remembrance becomes compassion." The feathers began to dissolve into light. Each particle drifted upward, rising through the trees, through the silver canopy of leaves, into the sky beyond sight.
One by one they vanished, each one becoming a star.
He looked up and saw the night sky shimmer anew, brighter than before. The missing constellations had returned. The stars formed shapes that told no stories, but felt like prayers. The last feather lingered before him, hovering in the air. He reached out, and it landed upon his palm, its warmth steady and pulsing. The feather spoke, not in words, but through feeling. It was gratitude, ancient and wordless. He held it close to his heart, whispering, "Then may remembrance never end." The feather dissolved into light and sank into his chest. The glow spread through him, soft and golden. For the first time since the night the pages fell, the book within the jar grew still. It no longer trembled with longing, it rested. He looked once more into the stream. This time the reflection moved with him. The wings beneath the surface were gone. Only his face remained, calm, lined by tears, illuminated by mercy. "You have seen the mirror," the reflection whispered. "Now walk as its image. The prophet rose, his body weary, but his heart luminous. The garden whispered farewell, not in sound, but through scent, the fragrance of rain, of fire, of light made humble. He turned to leave, but before he did, the ground beneath the silver trees shimmered once more. A single flower had bloomed where the angel once stood. Its petals were translucent, its center radiant. He knelt and touched it gently. The flower whispered, "The wings have returned to their maker. Go where silence calls you." He bowed low and stood once more. As he stepped beyond the edge of the garden, the air shifted behind him, the soft sound of wings folding, not in farewell, but in peace. He walked into the open desert, the stars blazing like 1,000 eyes awake at last. Above him, the heavens no longer felt distant. They felt alive. He whispered, "The mirror remembers." And somewhere, beyond sight, a new line appeared within the book of destiny. The one who looked into silence taught the heavens to see themselves again. The desert stretched ahead, vast and unending. Yet to the prophet it no longer felt empty. Every grain of sand shimmered faintly, each one like a letter from a language too holy to speak aloud. The air itself carried a rhythm, soft, slow, steady, as though all creation was breathing in time with something unseen. He had walked for days since leaving the garden. The nights were no longer cold, the days no longer cruel. The world seemed to move with him, not around him, and always beneath his ribs that quiet pulse of light. The feather's memory beats like a second heart. When he grew weary, he stopped beside a plain of white stone. There he rested, setting the jar before him. The book within was silent, but he could feel its presence, patient, alive, waiting. He whispered into the emptiness, "You led me through silence and memory, through the fall and the song. What is left to find?" The wind stilled. The air grew heavy, dense, almost tangible. Then he heard it, not sound, but something deeper. A breath that seemed to move through him, not around him. It was as if the world itself inhaled. He closed his eyes. The breath continued, slow and endless, a rhythm beyond time. And as it moved through him, he felt his thoughts fade. Not vanish, but dissolve into stillness. He felt his heartbeat match the pulse of the desert. His lungs filled with something brighter than air. A whisper formed within that breath. Faint, tender, infinite. "Do you remember me?" He fell to his knees, trembling. The voice did not echo. It was too close. It was not from above or within, it was both. It was the sound of being known. Tears blurred his vision.
"Yes," he whispered.
"I have remembered you in every silence." The wind stirred softly, circling him like unseen arms. "Then why do you seek?" He hesitated. "Because the world still forgets." There was no anger in the breath that followed.
"Only sorrow."
It was written that forgetfulness would be their mercy and remembrance of their trial. "The angels envy you, for you may forget and be forgiven. But you, child of dust, have carried remembrance beyond command." He bowed deeply, forehead pressed to stone. "Then tell me, Lord of the Pages, what is remembrance for?" The air grew still again. Then came the answer. Not words, but feeling. He saw visions without opening his eyes, oceans that once reflected heaven's breath, stars trembling as they were first named. The first dawn that rose not upon the world, but within the heart of the first believer. The voice wove through it all. "Remembrance is not memory. It is returning. Every breath that calls my name pulls the world closer to what it was before longing began." The prophet's tears fell silently. The ground beneath him shimmered as though each tear wrote a verse of its own. "Then why did you give us silence?" he asked softly. The breath answered, gentler still. "Because without silence, you would never hear me between your thoughts." He could not speak. The weight of it was too vast, too intimate. The very air seemed to kneel with him. In that moment, he felt something shift within him. Not a change, but a remembrance of what had always been. The breath that filled his lungs was not his own. The heartbeat he carried was older than time. The voice that spoke was not apart from him, but through him. He inhaled once more, and when he exhaled, it poured from his mouth, soft, golden, like mist at dawn. The light rose into the air, forming faint shapes that shimmered briefly before fading. Wings, rivers, words. Every memory he had gathered was being released, transformed back into breath. The world exhaled with him. He opened his eyes. The sky had changed. The stars were closer now, vast, trembling, radiant. They pulsed in time with his own heart. For the first time, he understood that heaven was not above, but within and around, breathing through everything that still remembered its source. He lifted the jar. The book within glowed once more, brighter than ever before. But now he could see it was not made of pages. It was made of breath. Light compressed into form, word condensed into matter. Every page was a living inhalation of God. He whispered, "Then everything that breathes is writing." The voice returned, tender and endless. Yes, and when the writing ends, the breath will return to the writer. He closed his eyes again, overwhelmed.
By the beauty of it.
He understood now that the book had never truly been lost, only scattered across creation, waiting to be read again by those who could listen to silence. The wind began to move once more, gentler than before. He looked up and saw a cloud forming, faint, luminous, shaped like wings, dissolving as it rose. He smiled. The angel who could not forget was finally free. He stood, lifting the jar to his chest, feeling its hum match his heartbeat. "Then let me carry your breath until I cannot," he whispered. The world exhaled again, not to answer, but to bless. He began to walk. The horizon glowed faintly, and somewhere in that glow, a new dawn waited, the kind not bound by time, but by remembrance. As he walked, he breathed, and with every breath he felt the world breathe with him. And though no sound came from his lips, the heavens heard a song of dust, remembering light, of silence, speaking again, of breath that no longer belonged to man alone. He walked for what felt like weeks, though time no longer kept count of him. The sun rose and fell without rhythm, as though the heavens themselves paused to watch his steps. The book's hum had softened into something like a heartbeat. Quiet, faithful, alive. Beyond the dunes, the earth began to change. The sand gave way to smooth stone, carved not by man, but by memory. Columns rose from the ground, half buried, each etched with symbols that glowed faintly when his shadow passed over them. They pulsed in response, recognizing him as though he had been here before. At first, he thought they were ruins, but when he walked farther, he saw movement. Faint lights shifting beneath the stone, weaving through cracks like veins of gold.
And then he saw it, the city.
It was not built upon the earth, but within it. Towers of glass and obsidian curved like ribs beneath a dome of shimmering mist. The streets wound in spirals, their paths moving inward toward a heart that glowed with faint, eternal light. The air was still, but alive, filled with the hum of something ancient remembering itself. He stood at the city's threshold. Before him stood gates so tall they vanished into haze. Their metal was neither gold nor silver, but something between, shimmering with color that changed as he breathed. Upon them, words had been engraved in a tongue he no longer feared to understand. Here lies the remembrance of what time could not erase. He placed his hand upon the gate. It was warm, pulsing like living skin. The book within the jar stirred, its pages whispering softly as though greeting an old friend. The gates opened without sound. He stepped inside. At once the world grew quiet. The hum deepened, vibrating beneath his feet. The streets shimmered like water. The air tasted of dust and lightning. The city was empty of bodies, but not of presence. Every wall, every tower, every shadow carried memory, not of death, but of pause. He walked slowly, reverently. Beneath his steps, faint lights flared, trails of remembrance waking where he passed. They formed shapes that dissolved too quickly to name, faces, prayers, fragments of laughter. He realized then that this city was alive, not with people, but with their echoes. He came upon a plaza at its center, circular and vast. In its middle stood a pool of black glass, so still it looked like the surface of sleep. Above it hovered a sphere of faint, golden light, spinning slowly, shedding motes that fell like dust, but vanished before touching ground. He approached, feeling his chest tighten. The light seemed familiar, too familiar. He whispered, "Are you the heart of what was lost?" The sphere pulsed once, and a voice answered, faint, ancient, and weary.
"No, child of dust. I am the memory of time itself."
The air rippled. The walls shimmered. The entire city seemed to breathe. "You stand where moments come to rest," the voice continued. "Every instant forgotten by the world finds refuge here."
Every tear unseen, every word unspoken, every mercy delayed, all of them sleep beneath these stones.
The prophet felt his knees weaken. "Then why bring me here?" "Because time too forgets. And when time forgets, the world grows ill." The sphere brightened slightly, and in its glow he saw the faintest shapes. Scenes, flickering like candlelight through water. He saw men at war, their cries silent. Mothers weeping for children whose names were never written. Cities burning with no witnesses left to remember them. He saw prophets silenced, saints buried without prayer, hearts breaking beneath the weight of days. He wept. The light dimmed as though mourning with him. "Every sorrow you see," said the voice, "once had a place in time, but when the world refused to remember, it came here. You have walked long enough to see what others turn away from. The book you carry has pages missing. They lie here beneath the veil of forgotten days." He looked down at the pool. Beneath the surface, faint glimmers of light shimmered like stars trapped under water. They pulsed in rhythm, steady, sorrowful. He whispered, "Can they be restored?" The voice replied, "Only if they are remembered by one who still believes that time was made for mercy." He closed his eyes, and the hum within his chest grew louder. He placed the jar beside the pool and knelt, lowering his hands into the dark water. It was cold, not with death, but with waiting. The moment his fingers touched it, the water came alive. Rings of light rippled outward. The air filled with whispers. Voices, countless and overlapping, speaking not in words, but in longing. "We remember."
"We remember."
The sound rose until the air itself vibrated with it. The book within the jar opened on its own, its pages glowing brighter than ever. The missing light from beneath the water rose like mist, streaming into the pages one by one, returning to where they had always belonged. When the last light entered, the pool fell still. The city grew silent once more, but the air felt different. Lighter, healed. The voice spoke again, softer now, as though fading. "Time remembers itself through you. But take care. Remembrance carries both mercy and burden. To know the story is to live it again." He nodded, tears falling freely. "I will carry what must be carried," he whispered. The sphere pulsed once, a single flash of gold that illuminated the whole city. Towers, gates, shadows, and then, slowly, it dimmed. The hum faded into quiet peace. The prophet rose, his reflection shimmering faintly in the pool. He looked not older but ancient, as though time itself had bent to watch him. He gathered the jar, now heavy with light, and turned toward the gates once more. As he left, the voice whispered behind him, "Remember, what is healed in memory is healed in time." He stepped through the gate, back into the desert night. The sky above shimmered softly, every star burning steadier than before. And in that vast stillness, he whispered, "Even time is forgiven." The prophet walked until the golden light of the city faded behind him, and the night gathered close once more. Yet its silence was not empty. It was full, dense with echoes that had not yet finished their story. Each step he took seemed to ring softly, as though the sand itself was counting. He thought the desert would swallow the memory of the city, but when he reached the plain beyond, he found something waiting. There, in the center of the barren land, stood a structure, half buried, half ruined, shaped like a great clock. Its surface shimmered faintly, though no moonlight touched it. It was carved from a single slab of black stone, vast as a mountain, its face divided not into hours, but into breaths. At its center turned a slow wheel of light, not gold or silver, but pale blue, rotating so gently that its motion could barely be seen. He approached with reverence, his steps echoing softly. The air grew heavy around him, thick with the scent of iron and rain. No cloud hung above. When he reached it, the clock's hum deepened, a tone low and soft, like the sound of a heart beneath centuries of silence. He placed his hand upon the stone. It was warm, alive, trembling faintly beneath his fingers. The book within his jar stirred, its pages turning themselves once, twice, before growing still. And then the voice came, "You have entered the measure of silence." The prophet fell to his knees, his head bowed low.
Who speaks?
"I am what counts between the words of God," the voice said. "I am the pause before mercy."
I am time's heartbeat when no one listens.
He trembled. "I have walked through the city where time slept.
I have seen light remember itself.
What remains now to be shown?" "The space between remembrance and return," replied the voice. "Even silence keeps time. But when faith fades, the clocks of heaven forget their purpose. I was left to turn without witness. The wheel of blue light pulsed once, its motion slowing until it was almost still. The prophet felt a pang of sorrow, deep and instinctive, the ache of a child watching an elder fade. "Why do you falter?" he asked.
Because the world no longer waits, said the voice.
Men fill every pause with noise. They speak without listening, move without breathing, live without waiting for what was promised. I have kept count for ages, but the silence I once guarded is gone. The prophet bowed lower. "Then let me wait with you." For a long while there was nothing, no sound, no movement, only the rhythm of his breath and the faint hum of the wheel. Then slowly the clock began to move again. One rotation, subtle but visible. The hum deepened, like thunder remembered in the bones of the earth. "You hear it?" said the voice. The sound of waiting. He closed his eyes. The tone filled him, not like sound, but like presence. It moved through his heart, his lungs, his thoughts, until his entire being pulsed in time with it. Then the vision began. He saw the world as it once was, a vast garden of beginnings. Light moved freely through time like wind, unbound, unmeasured. Days and nights were one breath. The clocks of heaven were not devices, but living beings, angels who counted not hours, but prayers. And among them was one, radiant, patient, silent, whose task was to measure the space between God's words and the world's reply. When creation sang, this angel waited. When silence fell, it counted the waiting. But then came forgetfulness. The songs grew loud, the prayers hurried, the pauses gone. And the angel was left turning in solitude, forgotten. The prophet wept. "You are that angel." The voice sighed, not in pride, but in weariness. "I am what remains of it." Its wings turned to wheels, its heartbeat to measure, its breath to ticking light.
I am all that is left of patience.
He pressed his forehead to the stone. "Then what can I do?" "Remember to wait," the voice replied. "Remind them that time is not a chain, but a circle. It does not pass, it returns. Every silence kept is a prayer unheard by the world, but known by God." The prophet sat back, breathing slowly. Around him, the desert shimmered faintly, not from heat, but from unseen motion. He realized that every grain of sand was moving, rising and falling in time with the clock's pulse. The entire desert was breathing. He whispered, Then all creation is waiting. The voice grew softer now, almost like a sigh. Yes. And when the last soul remembers to pause, when one heartbeat matches heaven's rhythm, the measure will be complete. The blue light brightened once, then dimmed again. Its motion slowed, then stopped entirely. The prophet panicked. "Wait, are you dying?" The voice replied gently. "No, I am resting. You have restored the silence I was made to keep." When you walked into the stillness, time remembered how to breathe. The hum faded. The clock grew quiet, its surface dull now, lifeless in color but peaceful in stillness. The air around him lightened, and he realized the faint scent of rain had returned. He stood slowly, tears glistening in his eyes.
"And this is the lesson," he whispered.
"Silence is not absence, and it is patience made holy." He placed his palm upon the stone one last time, feeling the faint warmth fade beneath his touch. Above him, the first stars of evening began to shine, each one pulsing faintly, as if echoing the heartbeat of the clock below. He looked to the horizon. The book glowed faintly at his side, content once more. He turned and began to walk. Behind him, the clock remained still, timeless, eternal, listening, and though it no longer moved, he could still feel it counting, marking each breath, each pause, each silent prayer the world forgot to say aloud. He walked until the night lost its edges. There was no horizon now, only darkness that shimmered faintly with unseen light. The world around him seemed suspended, caught between breath and eternity. Every step felt like walking through the heart of a dream that had forgotten to end. The book at his side glowed gently, each page pulsing like a heartbeat. He could hear it now, a faint ticking, soft as falling ash. It was not coming from the clock he had left behind. It was coming from within him. He stopped, pressing a hand to his chest. The rhythm was steady but different, slower, deeper, infinite. It was the sound of the great wheel still turning somewhere beyond all worlds, counting not seconds or minutes, but meaning. He whispered, "What is this hour that will not pass?" The air thickened. The darkness rippled like water touched by unseen hands. And then came the voice. Not distant this time, not around him, but inside him. "It is the first hour, the one that never ended." He trembled. "The hour of creation?" "Yes," said the voice. "The moment when light first answered the command be. The hour when time began its breath, and has not yet exhaled." He fell to his knees. The ground beneath him glowed faintly with golden light, forming symbols that changed as he looked at them. Verses of beginnings, written not in letters but in motion. The voice continued, "Every dawn, every birth, every act of mercy is that same first moment unfolding again. The world believes time moves forward, but it only deepens. You are still inside the first hour, the hour that waits for remembrance." He bowed his head, tears blurring his sight.
"Then nothing has ended?" "Nothing," said the voice.
"All endings are veils drawn across beginnings too radiant to be seen." He raised his gaze. The darkness above him shifted, forming waves of light, patterns that looked like breath made visible. The stars were gone now, replaced by a vast radiance without direction. Within it, he saw shadows, forms moving in slow rhythm, as though walking through water made of time itself. He recognized them, the keepers, the angels, the fallen star, the silent river, the rain, the garden, the clock. Each shape glowed faintly, bound by light that moved through them and returned to the center. To him, "You have walked through my memory," the voice said, "and now you stand within my breath." He closed his eyes, unable to bear the weight of it. "Why me?" he whispered. The voice softened, almost smiling through its sorrow. "'Cause you listened. The world hears many sounds, but seldom my silence. You carried remembrance through shadow and silence, through fire and flood, until even time turned its face toward you. Now you must speak what you have heard." He shook his head.
"I am only dust."
"All dust remembers light," came the reply.
"That is why I breathe through it."
A stillness fell. The ticking within him slowed until it matched the rhythm of the unseen light. He realized then that he was no longer apart from the hour. He was part of it. The breath of creation moved through him, and the light that had once fallen now rose within his chest. He lifted his hands. They glowed faintly, golden dust swirling.
G around his fingers.
The world began to pulse. Slow, vast, like the heartbeat of an ocean. What do you ask of me? To remember aloud. He opened his mouth, and what came out was not speech. It was light. Words formed without sound, weaving into the air like threads of dawn. They were not new words, but the first ones, the same that had once created all things. B. The desert around him awoke. The ground bloomed faintly with light. The air trembled as though rain would fall again. He could hear the whisper of rivers deep beneath the sand, awakening from ages of slumber. He looked up. The veil of darkness cracked. Through it, he saw the edge of the first morning still shining, still waiting for the world to remember it. The voice whispered once more, "This is the hour that never ends." It was never meant to pass, only to be remembered. He wept openly now, not from sorrow, but from the unbearable gentleness of it. He whispered through his tears, "Then let me remember forever." The book beside him closed on its own, its light folding inward, but he knew it was not ending. It was breathing. Each breath he took became its next page. The horizon shifted. The veil of darkness gave way to faint color. Not sunrise, not day, but something purer. The light was everywhere and nowhere, in the dust, in the silence, in him. He stood, his body trembling, his heart alive with divine memory. He spoke once more, not to the air, but to the one who had never truly left. The first hour still breathes, and somewhere, beyond the edges of time, a great exhalation came, soft, vast, eternal. The wind rose again, carrying his words into the unseen. The world began to move once more, slow and tender. And though no one would remember his name, every breath that ever was, and every dawn yet to come, would carry a whisper of his voice, the sound of remembrance becoming creation again. The prophet awoke beneath a sky that did not know morning. It was pale, neither day nor night. A soft, silver glow spread across the horizon like breath upon glass. The air was weightless, cool, alive with quiet expectancy. It felt like standing inside the space between two prayers, the pause where mercy gathers before it descends. He rose slowly, the jar still warm against his chest. The book within glowed faintly as though aware of where he had come. The wind carried no sand now, no heat, only light. It shimmered across the dunes in silver ribbons, leading him toward a vast plain of stone that stretched endlessly ahead. And there, above the horizon, hung two lights. The first was the sun, or what looked like it, burning with a steady golden fire that did not scorch. The second was the moon, luminous and full, resting beside it in the same sky. They did not compete. They breathed together, their radiance woven into one seamless glow. He had never seen such harmony. For as long as men had looked upward, the two lights had taken turns. One ruled the day, one the night. But here, in this forgotten hour, they shared the same sky. Two halves of the same breath, neither brighter than the other. He whispered, "Is this the covenant?" The air answered, not in thunder but in resonance. A low hum moved through the ground, through the wind, through him. It was the sound of agreement, ancient, sacred, alive. The lights trembled faintly. The prophet shielded his eyes, though the glow did not burn. Then a voice came, clear, soft, melodic, and impossibly near. Long before man walked the earth, we stood in witness. He looked upward. The sound had come from the moon. Its surface shimmered, and from it descended a soft veil of light, forming a shape. Not quite a figure, not quite a flame. It hovered above the stone, its edges shifting like mist. We were two lights born from one command, the voice continued. We were meant to guide the worlds through rhythm, one to wake, one to rest. But the first covenant was broken. The prophet bowed his head. What covenant did the heavens make? The figure of the moonlight descended closer. When time was new, we vowed never to shine together.
One would rule the waking, one the dreaming.
But when the first silence fell, when the song was broken, we looked upon the earth and wept. For the world was divided between knowing and forgetting, and so were we. We were torn apart by the very rhythm we were made to keep. The sun's light pulsed in response, not angrily, but like an echo of regret. Its golden fire shimmered across the plain, bathing everything in warmth. The prophet felt the pulse within his chest match their rhythm. Two heartbeats, one golden, one silver, interwoven. He whispered, "Then what do you seek now?" The moonlight drifted toward him, its tone tender and ancient, to be remembered together, to heal what division began. The covenant of the two lights was written before man's heartbeat. It was the law of balance. But when forgetfulness entered creation, one light burned in sorrow, and the other faded in silence. The sun carried pride. The moon carried patience. Both longed for reunion. He looked between them. The sun seemed to tremble with unspoken remorse. The moon's light rippled with forgiveness, and between their glow he saw something take form, a shape woven from both lights. It was neither flame nor shadow, neither day nor night. It was the color of peace, a hue unseen by mortal eyes. The moon's voice softened, almost a whisper. The prophet before you once asked to see both lights as one. He was told no mortal eyes could bear it. But you have walked through silence, fire, and time. You have seen the breath of creation itself. So we were called to meet. He bowed, trembling. Then let me be the witness of your reunion. The wind rose gently. The lights drew closer. Their edges touched, and for a brief, trembling instant, the world vanished into radiance. No shadow remained.
No horizon, no sound, only stillness.
In that stillness, he felt the truth. The two lights were not opposites. They were reflections of one another, each remembering what the other had forgotten. The sun's warmth longed to rest in the moon's calm. The moon's stillness yearned to remember the sun's fire. And when they touched, the world itself seemed to sigh. He fell to his knees, overcome. The light washed through him, not blinding but cleansing. Every thought, every sorrow, every ache illuminated and then forgiven. He heard the voice again, now layered. Sun and moon speaking as one. This is the covenant renewed, that light shall know patience, and patience shall know fire, that no soul shall burn without hope, and no night shall dream without dawn. The words echoed through his bones, carving themselves into his very breath. The jar beside him glowed, golden and silver light weaving together across its surface. The book within turned its pages slowly, absorbing the rhythm of the twin lights like a heart remembering its pulse. The air cooled. The brilliance softened. When he looked again, the two lights had separated, the sun moving toward the east, the moon drifting westward. But they did not depart in sorrow. They bowed toward one another. And in that gesture, he saw what the world had forgotten. Harmony is not sameness. It is love remembering balance. He rose slowly, still trembling. The sky dimmed back to dusk. His shadow stretched across the stone like a quiet oath. He whispered into the wind, "The covenant is kept." And somewhere between the two horizons, two lights answered. One with warmth, one with peace, and both with love. When night returned, it came with no stars. The prophet sat upon the same plane of stone, his eyes turned upward toward the hollow sky. The sun had vanished beyond the veil, yet its warmth lingered faintly, woven into the wind like a farewell not yet spoken. The moon hung low now, dimmer, gentler, its glow pulsing like the slow breath of a weary soul.
He could still feel the echo of their union with
Lection 12. In him, two lights, two heartbeats, one silence that had healed them both. But he knew their covenant was not yet whole. For to remember one another was mercy, to understand one another was redemption. The air trembled, the horizon shimmered with faint fire. He rose. A glow began to rise from the east. Not the golden light of day, but a soft, sorrowful crimson, the color of dawn that grieves for night. The sun appeared again, but not in glory. Its fire flickered low, its edges dimmed. Around its form hung veils of smoke, the residue of ages spent burning alone. And from within that light came a voice, heavy with remembrance.
Long have I shone for the world that forgets me. The prophet bowed low.
O light of the first morning, why do you grieve? Because I have given without measure, said the sun. I have burned for the cold-hearted, shone upon the faithless, carried warmth to the ungrateful. Yet none remember the cost. They call my light endless, yet I feel every spark I lose. I am the fire of obedience, and still I ache. The voice cracked, and the plain darkened for a moment. He felt the heat fade, replaced by the shiver of exhaustion, as if even the sun could grow weary of shining. He whispered, but you were never alone. The moon waited in silence for your return. The sun's fire quivered, its voice softer now.
Yes, she who reflects my light, who guards my shadow. I once envied her peace. I thought less of her, because she borrowed.
But I did not know. She carried what I could not. When the world slept, she bore the burden of my absence. The prophet looked upward. The moon trembled faintly as if hearing his words. Its silver glow flickered in rhythm with the sun's wavering flame. We were both commanded, the sun continued, to give without wanting. But I gave too fiercely. My fire became pride, and pride became isolation.
I thought to be brightest was to be nearest to the source.
But I learned, in brightness, one may lose the tenderness of mercy. The prophet lowered his gaze, the wind stirring his robes like a sigh. Then what is brightness without mercy? A fire that cannot see itself, said the sun. Its glow deepened, casting long shadows across the plain. The stones at his feet shimmered with gold and ash. When the covenant broke, I blamed her, the sun whispered. I thought the moon betrayed me by hiding her face. But she was not hiding, she was mourning. She took upon herself the silence I could not bear. For every flame that I became, she became a mirror. And now I see what I once could not. She remembered me when I forgot myself. The air shimmered with warmth. He could feel the sorrow in its light. Not anger, not regret, but longing. The kind of longing that waits for forgiveness it no longer deserves. The prophet raised his face to the heavens. Then ask her to forgive you. The sun's fire trembled. For a moment all was still. Then a thin beam of golden light broke from its center, reaching toward the moon. It touched her surface gently, like a trembling hand upon a beloved's face. The moon glowed brighter at the touch, and not in rejection, but in response. The prophet watched as the two lights reached for one another across the expanse of the sky, their radiance threading together like woven breath. And then softly, the moon spoke, her voice the sound of waves meeting shore.
O fire that gave the first dawn, I never turned away.
I only waited for you to look upon me and see not shadow, but reflection. For light is not whole until it learns to listen. The sun's voice broke like a stormlight across a cloud. I see you now, and I remember the vow I broke. The wind carried their words across the desert like psalms. The prophet felt tears sting his eyes. He knew that what he witnessed was older than all stories, the reconciliation of what had been divided since the first breath. The sun's fire softened. The crimson hue faded into a pale golden white. The moon's glow deepened into silver blue, her light steady and unafraid. They no longer sought to outshine, only to exist together, two halves remembering the same whole. The prophet lifted his hands toward them and whispered, O Lord, who made light in pairs, you have shown me that even fire can weep, and even silence can heal. May every soul that burns remember its reflection. Above him, the twin lights pulsed once, in harmony. A single droplet of golden light fell from the sun and landed upon the stone before him. It did not burn. It cooled, forming a tear of crystal that shimmered with both gold and silver. Fire and reflection bound in one. He knelt, touching it gently. The crystal thrummed beneath his fingers, alive with the rhythm of both lights. He whispered, "The sun wept and its tears became peace." The book within the jar stirred again. One page turned itself, glowing with golden ink. Upon it, new words appeared, not written by hand, but by remembrance. When pride learns tenderness, dawn will never fade. He held the jar close, the crystal resting within his palm. The wind stilled. The air was warm again, not with flame, but with grace. Above, the sun and moon shared one last glance across the horizon, and the world sighed with relief, as if balance had finally found its way home. When the lights withdrew to their appointed realms, the world did not wake. The sun slept behind the horizon, and the moon lingered above the plains, reluctant to leave. What should have been dawn became something else, a twilight that refused to fade, a hush that wrapped creation in breathless waiting. The prophet stood in that half-light, his shadow stretching both east and west. It was neither day nor night, neither silence nor song. Even the wind had grown still, as though listening for a command that had not yet come. He whispered to the heavens, "Why does the night not end?" The air trembled, and from the quiet came a voice. Not the sun, nor the moon, but something deeper, older, vaster. It was the voice of the night itself. "Because the ending is the last illusion," it said, "and I am the veil that shows what cannot end." The prophet bowed his head.
"And you are in darkness."
"I am what light was born through," said the voice, vast and patient. "I am the cradle that held the first spark. Without me no dawn could rise, for no dawn exists without the silence that receives it." He trembled, for the sound filled everything, sky, earth, and the space within his ribs. The night was not absent. It was awareness. It knew the breath of every creature, the turning of every star, the ache of every prayer whispered in secret. The prophet whispered, "Then you are not the end." "No," said the night, "I am the waiting before the next beginning." The air shimmered faintly, and he saw the horizon breathe. Darkness moved like waves upon an unseen ocean, flowing slowly around him. Each current carried fragments of light, tiny embers that pulsed with memory. They drifted close, circling him like fireflies made of starlight. "These," said the night, "are the dreams of all that was." He watched as the lights swirled around him, visions unfolding within their glow. He saw the fallen star, the silver river, the angel of remembrance, the garden beyond silence, the clock that counted breath, the covenant of the two lights. Each shimmered once and dissolved, but their echoes remained, like scent after rain. "All you have seen," said the night, "was written before you took your first breath. But there is one page yet unread, the one that no book dares to keep." The prophet knelt, heart trembling. "Show me." The lights dimmed. The sky deepened into blackness, so complete that even thought faltered. In that endless dark, something began to take shape. Faint at first, then clearer. It was a door formed not of matter but of stillness. Every breath he took seemed to push it open a little more. "This," said the night, "is the threshold of forgetting." He frowned.
"But I have spent my life remembering."
"And that is why you were brought here," the voice replied. "Remembrance is the key, but forgetting is the gate. Only one who remembers may forget rightly." He hesitated. "To forget is to lose."
"No," said the night, "to forget is to return."
The words pierced him. He understood. Remembrance was the journey outward, but forgetting was the return home. All who remembered must one day release what they carried, so that the story might breathe again. He stood, trembling before the unseen door. What lies beyond? The knight answered, the writer. The world held its breath. Even his pulse slowed. He whispered, then this is the end? No, prophet, said the knight. This is the beginning that begins all others. The writer has waited not to speak, but to listen. Through you, through every silence, through every light that learned to weep. You have walked through memory to remember what cannot be written. He fell to his knees, tears glistening in the half-light. Then what is left for me to do? Breathe, said the knight, and when you do, let the story return to its source. He closed his eyes. The stillness pressed gently against him, not heavy but vast, infinite, kind. He inhaled slowly. The air was cool, fragrant with dust and rain. When he exhaled, the embers around him rose, hundreds, thousands, lifting upward, vanishing into the unseen sky. Each ember carried a memory. The river's song, the angel's sorrow, the sun's repentance, the moon's forgiveness. They ascended not like sparks dying, but like prayers returning home. He whispered through his tears, then even the night remembers the light. The voice softened, now closer, now within him. The night is the memory of light. The door before him began to fade, dissolving into the dark. It was no longer something to open, but something to become. He felt himself weightless, the pages of his being turning inward. Every sorrow, every revelation, every sacred name written upon his soul folded back into silence. When he opened his eyes again, the sky was filled with stars. Each one shimmered like a verse spoken aloud. The moon lingered on the horizon, silver and serene, her glow reflected upon the dunes. The world had not ended. It had only remembered how to rest. He stood once more, the jar glowing softly against his chest. The book was still, its pages closed. Yet he knew it was not finished, only waiting for another breath. He whispered, the story sleeps, not ends. And the night replied, its voice as soft as mercy, as do you. He lay down upon the sand. The wind covered him like a cloak, the stars flickering gently above. The last sound he heard before sleep was not the voice of heaven, nor the hum of time, but the faint turning of a page somewhere between worlds, waiting for light to return. When the prophet awoke, the stars had faded, and dawn hung uncertainly over the horizon, neither bright nor dim, suspended like a held breath. The air was still cool, heavy with silence. He rose slowly, the weight of sleep clinging to his shoulders like mist. The jar pressed warm against his chest. The book within seemed to hum faintly as though it too had dreamt. He found himself standing at the edge of a barren plain, yet something beneath the sand called to him. A rhythm faint as memory, pulsing beneath his feet. He knelt, brushing aside the surface until the dust revealed what it had hidden, the corner of a foundation carved from stone smoother than glass. It glowed faintly beneath the morning light. He whispered, what place is this? And the wind, soft, cautious, older than time, replied, this is the beginning of what was never finished. He understood then. He stood where a temple had once been planned, a dwelling not for man, but for remembrance itself. The stones beneath him were not abandoned. They were waiting for hands that had never returned. He walked along the faint outline of the foundation. The air grew warmer, the light gentler. Each step stirred whispers, the echoes of chisels that had once cut through silence, the rhythm of labor woven with prayer. We built with dust, the whispers said, hoping dust might remember light. He followed their song until he reached the center of the plain, a single column still standing, cracked and weathered, but unfallen. Its surface bore inscriptions too old to read, but when the sun touched it, the markings shimmered faintly, revealing glimpses of symbols that breathed. He placed his palm upon it. The column was warm, almost alive. A vision unfolded, not before his eyes, but within his soul. He saw people, countless, radiant, weary, gathered upon this very ground. They carried no weapons, no gold, no banners.
Only stone and song.
Their faces were streaked with dust, their hands trembling, yet their eyes shone with faith that burned without fire. They worked in silence, but every movement was prayer. Each block they lifted became a verse. Each line they carved, a remembrance. Their voices rose not in speech, but in breath. One great inhalation of devotion building toward heaven. But then came silence. Not divine silence, but the silence of forgetting. Generations passed. The builders slept, the winds returned, and the dust, ever patient, covered what faith had begun. The prophet's heart ached. Why did they stop? The vision answered, the air rippling faintly around him, because they sought to build for the eyes, not the unseen. They wished to touch heaven with their walls, but heaven was already within their breath. The temple was never meant to rise from stone. It was meant to awaken in the heart. He fell to his knees. Then what is this place now? The wind replied, a lesson in unfinished prayers. He bowed low until his forehead touched the sand. The earth beneath was warm, as if remembering the hands that once blessed it. He whispered, then let me finish what they began. At that the ground trembled softly, not in warning but in acknowledgement. The column glowed brighter. The air filled with dust that shimmered like tiny sparks. The prophet stood and spread his arms, not knowing what to do except remember. He closed his eyes and began to breathe, slow, deep, rhythmic. Each inhale drew in the silence of the world. Each exhale carried the memory of light, and as he breathed, the dust began to move. It rose from the ground in soft spirals, curling and folding in the air. The columns reappeared, not of stone, but of radiance, woven from the same light that lived within his breath. The walls formed themselves, not around him, but within him. He felt his chest expand, his heart aligning with a rhythm not his own. The book at his side opened, its pages turning without wind. The words upon them began to lift from the parchment. Letters made of light, hovering like petals. They floated outward, settling upon the invisible pillars, carving scripture into air. The temple shimmered, vast, ethereal, unseen by eyes that sought stone. The prophet whispered, the temple was never built because it was never meant to end. The light responded, gentle waves of gold and silver running through the invisible walls. Within the silence, he heard faint voices. The builders, the angels, the keepers of time, all joining in one soundless harmony. Every prayer builds what hands cannot. He fell to his knees again, weeping softly. His tears struck the sand and turned to pearls of light that sank into the earth. The ground beneath him pulsed once, steady and alive. He looked around, and though no walls surrounded him, he felt enclosed in the most sacred of spaces. The air was holy, the light is alive, and within him something ancient stirred. The same pulse that once moved through the angel's wings, the river's song, the covenant's flame. The voice returned, now closer, as if speaking from within his own breath. You have built what was forgotten. The temple stands not in stone, but in stillness. Wherever remembrance lives, it rises again. He looked to the horizon, endless, open, shimmering, and understood that the temple's foundation stretched across all creation. Every soul was a pillar, every act of mercy a stone, every silence a prayer set into its invisible wall. He whispered through his tears, then all who breathe are builders. The wind answered softly, and all who remember are sanctuaries. He bowed once more, pressing his forehead to the living dust. O Lord, he said, let this unfinished house remain forever unfinished, that the work of love may never cease. A soft radiance spread through the sky. The foundation below glowed like dawn beneath the sand. He stood again, weary but whole, the temple alive around him, unseen yet eternal. The book closed, its hum fading into peace. And as the first light of day crept across the plain, he whispered, "The temple was never built because it was never lost." The prophet remained upon the plain long after the invisible temple had risen in silence. The air shimmered faintly with light that only the heart could see. It was as though the unseen pillars breathed. Slow, deep, eternal. Each exhalation bent the horizon, and every inhalation drew the heavens closer. He walked among them, though his feet touched only sand. Yet he could feel them. Vast, luminous columns that hummed softly like strings of divine memory. They were warm, alive, aware. As he passed one, it pulsed faintly. Another responded, echoing the same rhythm. Soon, all the invisible pillars began to vibrate in harmony until the entire plain became one living chord. The prophet placed his palm upon the air where the nearest pillar stood. A faint light rippled outward from the point of contact, spreading like a breath across still water. The vibration deepened, and he heard it. The faintest sound of voices, not human, not angelic. The sound was older. "We were once mountains," the voices said, their tones layered like wind moving through chasms. "Before the earth was cooled, before dust remembered form, we stood between heaven and sea. Then we were taken, not destroyed, but hidden. We became pillars of remembrance, the supports of prayer itself." He closed his eyes, bowing his head. "And this temple is older than time?"
"Older than light," they whispered.
For light was born through our silence. We did not hold up the sky. We held the command that made the sky." The prophet trembled. The air around him thickened with a living sound. The hum of the pillars wove itself into the rhythm of his own breath. He whispered, "If you are the pillars, then what am I?" A pause, vast, kind, echoing through every direction at once. "You are the listener. Without you, we remain silent." He fell to his knees. His hands pressed into the dust that still glowed faintly with hidden light. The revelation ached like beauty too great to bear. "Then let me listen," he said. And so he did. He stilled himself until his breath disappeared into the hum. The sound of the pillars deepened, gathering into a single low note that pulsed through the ground and into his chest. He felt it spread through him, up his spine, through his veins. A vibration that became light, and a light that became knowing. Visions opened before him. He saw the creation of the pillars, not built, but spoken. Each one was a syllable in the first divine utterance, a bridge between silence and existence. They were not objects, but moments, points of stillness in which God's word rested between command and becoming. Each pillar was a name, not of a place, but of a mercy. The first was patience, the second, forgiveness, the third, light within shadow, the fourth, peace in waiting, the fifth, return. The prophet wept softly. These were not merely virtues. They were the structure of all that is. The temple, he realized, was the architecture of divine memory itself. We were placed to keep the world from collapsing into its own forgetfulness, the pillars whispered. But when mankind ceased to listen, our hum was lost to wind and thunder. We were not destroyed when we were drowned in noise. He pressed his forehead to the earth. Then let the silence of the world hear you again. He inhaled deeply. The air shimmered, and when he exhaled, a long, low tone escaped him. Not a sound of the throat, but of the soul. It joined the vibration of the pillars, amplifying them. The earth itself began to glow. Each pillar flared into visibility. Immense, radiant, seamless, reaching far beyond the clouds. Their surfaces were not solid, but woven from light that flowed like breath. Script burned faintly along their length, verses written in no tongue, yet instantly understood by the heart. He read what the world had forgotten. To remember is to rebuild what never fell.
Every silence is a foundation.
When the last pillar trembles, love will be its echo. The words carved themselves into him. He could feel them pulsing behind his ribs. The pillars sang once more, their harmony slow and vast. Then above the hum came another voice, softer, higher, almost like a child. We remember the sky. He looked upward. Through the pillar's glow, he saw faint movement above. Not stars, but fragments of radiance descending like gentle rain. Each fragment pulsed with blue fire before vanishing into the tops of the pillars. "Sky remembers us too," said the voices. "It has waited to rest upon mercy again." He realized then that the heavens were not distant. They were lowering themselves, drawn by remembrance. The pillars were not holding the sky up. They were welcoming it home. Tears blurred his vision. He whispered, "Then heaven and earth are not separate." "They never were," the pillars answered. "They only forgot they were built of the same breath." The light of the pillars softened, settling into a steady glow. The wind returned, moving gently through the invisible temple. It carried with it a fragrance unlike any before. Rain and stone and dawn, all woven together. The prophet stood once more. The book within the jar opened slightly, and one page fluttered free, hovering before him, trembling with light. Upon it appeared a single line written in the same living script as the pillars. The pillars remember the sky, and the sky remembers love. He caught the page carefully. It felt weightless, warm. He folded it gently and placed it within his robes.
"And the temple stands again," he whispered.
The voices answered as one, fading like breath into wind. "The temple stands wherever someone listens." And as the echo faded, the pillars became unseen once more. Yet their hum lingered, deep, steady, endless, woven now into the rhythm of his own heartbeat. He looked once more to the sky. The clouds glowed faintly like walls unseen, and the horizon shimmered with peace. He whispered to himself, "I am not walking upon the earth.
"I am walking through its prayer."
And the wind, soft and eternal, replied, "Then walk gently." He stood at the center of the invisible temple, where no walls stood yet. Every boundary of the world seemed to bow around him. The hum of the pillars had quieted to a slow, steady rhythm, not fading, but settling, like the heartbeat of a child, finally at peace. The prophet inhaled. The air was warm, heavy with memory. When he exhaled, he could see the breath shimmer before him, forming faint traces of light that curved like script. They hung in the air for only a moment before dissolving. But in that moment, he realized something profound. The walls of this temple were not built by stone, nor by hand, nor even by sound. They were built by breath. Each exhalation of faith, each whisper of prayer, each sigh of surrender, all of it gathered into invisible architecture, stronger than marble, softer than mercy. He whispered, "Then even breath is worship." The air trembled in agreement.
"Every breath that remembers," came the unseen rep.
Like it becomes foundation. He knelt upon the sand and began to breathe deliberately. Slow, reverent, sacred. Each inhalation felt like drawing heaven into his lungs. Each exhalation, like returning it to the world. The wind around him began to rise, forming faint currents that circled the plain. The air shimmered where he breathed. Silver and gold threads coiling upward, weaving unseen walls from nothingness. He could feel the structure forming. The breath gathered itself into arcs, vaults, and domes made of rhythm and silence. Every sigh became stone, every heartbeat a beam of light. The prophet's eyes filled with tears. He understood that creation itself was the breath of God, still exhaling, still building, still speaking worlds into being with every pulse of remembrance. He whispered softly into the wind, "Then to forget is to crumble, and to breathe is to build again." The hum deepened. The book at his side opened once more. Its pages glowed, and from them escaped small spirals of light, each shaped like a breath, alive and pulsing. They joined the walls forming around him, merging with the air until everything shimmered. The invisible temple now stood complete, not as a building, but as a living being.
It moved when he moved, breathed when he breathed.
"This is the temple of the breath," said a voice, soft, serene, woven from the harmony of all he had met. The angel, the fallen light, the river, the clock, the twin suns. It is the dwelling of all remembrance, built from what cannot die. The prophet bowed deeply, forehead pressed to the sand that now shone faintly with blue light. "And let my breath be its final stone." He exhaled once more, slow and long. The sound was almost music, and a vibration that reached far beyond hearing. The walls pulsed with radiance, each strand of air glowing brighter. And then something unexpected happened. The breath did not fade. It multiplied. From every direction, new breaths joined his own, faint, countless, ancient. The sighs of prophets who had come before him, the prayers of children asleep in forgotten cities, the quiet murmur of stars obeying their course. Even the dunes seemed to exhale, and the wind responded with gentleness. The entire world was breathing with him. He looked up, and for a moment, the invisible walls became visible, not as structure but as memory. He saw the faces of the builders who had once stood here. He saw the hands of angels tracing verses into dust. He saw the first dawn entering through a doorway that was never built. The temple glowed from within, pure and weightless. "You have rebuilt what was never destroyed," said the voice. "The breath that left Eden has found its echo in you." Tears streamed down his face. "Then this Eden is restored?"
"No," came the gentle reply.
"It is Eden remembered, and remembrance is greater than return." The realization sank into him that paradise was not lost land, but living memory. The temple did not stand in space. It existed in the breath of every creature that still longed for the source. He whispered, "Then every heart is a gate." "And every breath," said the voice, "is a prayer passing through it." The light of the temple dimmed softly, folding itself back into the wind. The pillars grew faint, the hum easing into silence. But the peace that remained was vast, too vast to belong to earth alone. He stood once more, the sand beneath his feet glowing faintly. The jar at his side was silent now. The book within no longer turned its pages. It simply breathed, slow, eternal. He looked upward. The sky had returned, gentle blue spilling across the horizon. He felt the pulse of all creation moving through him. He whispered to the wind, "Then this temple shall never end." And the wind replied, almost smiling, "It will end only when breath ends. And breath never dies, it returns." He closed his eyes and inhaled once more, letting the sacred air fill him completely. He felt the walls, unseen but everlasting, rise again, not around him this time, but within. When he opened his eyes, the world was brighter, but quiet. The temple had vanished, yet he knew he carried it with him now. In his chest, in his breath, in the silence that followed every word, he whispered, "The temple that was never built is built with every breath." And somewhere, deep in the unseen, a single note of light answered him. Soft, pure, unending. He walked until the sand turned cold beneath his feet, until the desert gave way to smooth stone, and the stone to a plain so still it seemed carved from silence itself. The horizon was hidden by mist, and above him hung a sky without stars. It was not dark nor light. It was something between, like the color of breath before dawn. The book was silent. The air was heavy with memories unspoken. He felt the hum of everything that had come before. The fire of angels, the covenant of light, the breath of the temple, but now all that sound had condensed into one vast, living hush. In the center of that silence he saw it, a pool. It was wide and perfect, smooth as glass, but unlike the rivers and wells of the world, this one did not reflect. The sky above it was blank, and so too the water. Even when he stepped close, his face cast no image. It was as though the surface swallowed light itself. He whispered, "What water is this that remembers nothing?" And the air answered softly, It remembers everything. He knelt beside it. The pool gave no ripple, no sound. He reached out his hand, hesitated, then touched its surface. It was not cold, nor warm, but alive, like touching skin that breathed without pulse. The water did not move. Instead, it deepened, its color fading until it was no color at all, only depth. In that depth, faint shapes began to move, shadows that seemed to drift upward but never reached the surface. Faces. Not of angels or men as he knew them, but of beings made from light and time. They floated within the depth like embers trapped in glass. Some looked peaceful.
Others wept.
All were silent. The prophet drew back, his heart trembling. Who were they? The wind stirred faintly, carrying a whisper that sounded like a sigh from every direction at once. They are the ones who were forgotten before death. He lowered his head. Forgotten? Yes, the voice said. The souls who were never mourned, whose names were never spoken. The ones whose light faded unseen. The world forgot them, but I did not. He realized then that the voice was not the wind. It was the pool itself. The water spoke without sound, its voice slow and endless, like something that had waited too long to be heard. I am the mirror of those who are unseen.
Every tear uncounted, every prayer unheard, every mercy unspoken, I hold them all.
He looked into its depth again. The faces were endless now. Children, wanderers, prophets, kings, slaves, those whose stories had dissolved into dust. He could feel their longing, not for life, but for remembrance. He wept quietly. His tears fell into the pool, vanishing without ripple, yet each drop glowed faintly as it sank. As if accepted, he whispered, "Then let me see them." The pool shimmered, its surface parting slightly. The air cooled, and the mist around him thickened. The voices grew louder, not as cries, but as breathing, countless and soft. "To see us," they said, "you must see without eyes." He closed them. The world went dark, but not empty. He began to feel what the eyes had never shown him. He felt the warmth of children laughing in forgotten villages, the trembling of hands that had built temples now lost to sand, the ache of mothers praying in silence, the hope of men who died in mercy but were never named. They were everywhere, within him, around him, breathing through the air itself.
We are the unseen foundation, they whispered.
The stones the world forgot, but heaven still counts. He fell to his knees, his tears flowing freely. "Then what do you ask of—"
"F me. Only this," they replied.
"Remember that we were—" He opened his eyes. The pool glowed faintly now, light rising from beneath the surface. The faces faded, replaced by thousands of faint sparks, each one a soul alive in remembrance. The prophet whispered, "You are not forgotten. Your light still breathes." The pool responded, a single ripple moving outward, wide and soft, touching every part of its surface. The air trembled. The mist shifted, and then something strange happened. The pool began to reflect. He looked down, expecting his own image, but what he saw was not himself.
He saw everyone.
Every face he had glimpsed within its depths now shone within the reflection, not as separate beings, but as one vast living face composed of all light and sorrow, joy and faith that had ever been. It was beautiful beyond language, and for the first time the pool spoke not as many, but as one. We were never lost.
Only waiting for someone to look long enough.
He bowed low, forehead pressed to the wet stone beside the pool. His tears joined it, mingling with the water, until there was no boundary between them. When he rose, the reflection changed again. The great face dissolved, and this time his own face appeared. But different. It was luminous, ancient, filled with the light of countless souls that now looked through him. He understood then. To remember the forgotten was to become their voice, their breath, their continuation. The book within his jar stirred once more. Its pages glowed, and new words appeared upon one that had long remained blank. No soul is lost that is remembered by love. The wind sighed softly as though relieved. The mist began to thin. The horizon brightened faintly with the blush of morning. He whispered to the fading pool, "Then may remembrance be my mirror." The water pulsed once, faintly, as if nodding, and grew still. Its surface cleared, its depth vanished, and when he looked again, it was only sand. But the air smelled of rain and memory, and somewhere deep within, he knew the pool still waited. Invisible now, but eternal, reflecting only those who remember what the world forgets. He turned, lifting the jar gently. The book glowed steady and calm, and as he began to walk once more, the faintest sound followed him. A soft ripple, like the heartbeat of a world learning to remember again. When he returned to the place where the pool had vanished, he found only wind and light. No trace of water, no ripple, no reflection. Yet the silence hummed faintly beneath the air, like a chord played beneath the skin of the world. The prophet stood still, listening. It was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of something that still watched, still waited. He closed his eyes, and the sound began again, faint, like distant rain. The air darkened, the horizon disappeared, and before him the pool returned, vast, deep, luminous, breathing softly as though it had always been there, hidden behind the veil of sight. Its surface shimmered, and beneath it the faint outlines of faces began to move once more. But this time they were not sorrowful. They were watching him. "You came back," they whispered, their voices rising like mist from the depths. He bowed his head. "I came to remember." The water stirred faintly, forming rings that spread outward and never broke. Each ripple carried sound, and within each sound, memory. He could hear them. Fragments of laughter, prayers half-spoken, songs cut short by time. They rose gently, surrounding him like a soft wind. The air filled with presence. "We are not lost," they said. "We are the breath that others forgot to take. We are the echoes of names that never found rest." The prophet's voice trembled.
"And what is this place? A grave?"
"No," said the water. "A waiting room between remembrance and return." The words lingered, and as they did, the shapes beneath the surface began to shift, not dissolving, but transforming. Their faces blurred and merged like stars weaving into constellations, and then he saw them as they truly were.
Not bodies.
Not souls, but reflections of light awaiting their name in the divine memory. Each spark pulsed like a heartbeat, and with every pulse a word formed, not spoken aloud, but written upon the water itself. He leaned closer. The words shimmered, faint and holy. The ones who are remembered will rise again. Tears gathered in his eyes. He reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the surface once more. This time the water did not swallow his reflection. It embraced it. The moment his hand met its surface, warmth spread through him, not like fire, but like recognition. The faces beneath smiled faintly, and suddenly he knew them. They were not strangers. He saw the eyes of a child whose laughter once echoed through his dreams. He saw the face of a woman who prayed for rain centuries ago. He saw the reflection of an old man who died beneath a tree no one remembered. Every soul he had ever carried within his breath was here, waiting to be remembered back into being. The realization broke him. He sank to his knees beside the pool, hands pressed against the surface, tears falling freely.
"Then memory is resurrection," he whispered.
"And forgetting," said the water, "is another kind of death." The prophet wept until his tears blended with the pool, and when his weeping slowed, the surface changed again. It no longer showed faces nor light. It showed him, not as he was, but as he had been, again and again. He saw lifetimes unfolding, echoes of himself in ages past. A scribe, writing by the light of an oil lamp, trembling as words of destiny burned his fingers. A boy lost in a storm, whispering prayers to the unseen. A soldier who refused to lift his sword, standing still before an empire's wrath. And even further back, a fragment of light kneeling before the throne, receiving the command to remember. He understood. He had been here before. He had always been walking toward this mirror. He whispered, "Then even I am among the forgotten." The pool's voice softened. All who live are forgotten once.
Even angels are remembered only when they bow.
What redeems is not sight but remembrance. He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead to the water. The surface pulsed once, and everything around him dissolved. He found himself standing in a vast, endless expanse of night. No stars, no ground, no sky.
Only himself and the sound of distant breathing.
And in that breathing he heard the rhythm of every soul ever made. "This is where they wait," said the voice. The space between silence and calling. He turned, slowly, feeling the presence of countless beings around him. Unseen, yet undeniable. The air quivered with the weight of waiting.
"They are not asleep," said the voice. "They are listening."
"For their names," he whispered. "Then let me speak to them." And one by one he began to name what he remembered. He spoke not in words, but in feeling. The laughter of children, he named it. The weeping of mothers, kings, he named it.
The sound of rivers, he named it.
The scent of rain upon dust, and he named it. The silence between prayers, and he named that too. Each time he named, the darkness around him brightened faintly. Shapes began to form, not faces, but lights, countless and soft. They rose, weightless and silent, filling the void with color. The prophet stood in awe as the world around him bloomed with remembrance.
"You have said what was buried," said the voice.
And so they rise. He wept again, not from sorrow this time, but from the unbearable beauty of knowing that nothing was truly lost. The light of the forgotten gathered around him, swirling upward like a golden storm. The pool appeared once more beneath his feet, though now it reflected everything: stars, mountains, oceans, hearts. The whole world shimmered upon its surface. He looked down and saw his reflection again. But it was not his alone. Every forgotten soul knows.
"If me? Only this," they replied.
"Remember that we were—" He opened his eyes. The pool glowed faintly now, light rising from beneath the surface. The faces faded, replaced by thousands of faint spark, each one a soul, alive in remembrance. The prophet whispered, "You are not forgotten. Your light still breathes." The pool responded, a single ripple moving outward, wide and soft, touching every part of its surface. The air trembled. The mist shifted.
And then something strange happened. The pool began to reflect.
He looked down, expecting his own image, but what he saw was not himself.
He saw everyone.
Every face he had glimpsed within its depths now shone within the reflection, not as separate beings, but as one vast, living face, composed of all light and sorrow, joy and faith that had ever been. It was beautiful beyond language, and for the first time, the pool spoke not as many, but as one. "We were never lost."
Only waiting for someone to look long enough.
He bowed low, forehead pressed to the wet stone beside the pool. His tears joined it, mingling with the water, until there was no boundary between them. When he rose, the reflection changed again. The great face dissolved, and this time his own face appeared, but different. It was luminous, ancient, filled with the light of countless souls that now looked through him. He understood then, to remember the forgotten was to become their voice, their breath, their continuation. The book within his jar stirred once more. Its pages glowed, and new words appeared upon one that had long remained blank. "No soul is lost that is remembered by love." The wind sighed softly as though relieved. The mist began to thin. The horizon brightened faintly with the blush of morning. He whispered to the fading pool, "Then may remembrance be my mirror." The water pulsed once, faintly, and as if nodding, and grew still. Its surface cleared, its depth vanished, and when he looked again, it was only sand. But the air smelled of rain and memory, and somewhere deep within, he knew the pool still waited, invisible now, but eternal, reflecting only those who remember what the world forgets. He turned, lifting the jar gently. The book glowed steady and calm, and as he began to walk once more, the faintest sound followed him, a soft ripple like the heartbeat of a world learning to remember again. When he returned to the place where the pool had vanished, he found only wind and light. No trace of water, no ripple, no reflection. Yet the silence hummed faintly beneath the air, like a chord played beneath the skin of the world. The prophet stood still, listening. It was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of something that still watched, still waited. He closed his eyes, and the sound began again, faint like distant rain. The air darkened, the horizon disappeared, and before him the pool returned. Vast, deep, luminous, breathing softly as though it had always been there, hidden behind the veil of sight. Its surface shimmered, and beneath it the faint outlines of faces began to move once more. But this time they were not sorrowful. They were watching him. "You came back," they whispered, their voices rising like mist from the depths. He bowed his head.
"I came to remember."
The water stirred faintly, forming rings that spread outward and never broke. Each ripple carried sound, and within each sound, memory. He could hear them. Fragments of laughter, prayers half-spoken, songs cut short by time. They rose gently, surrounding him like a soft wind. The air filled with presence. "We're not lost," they said. "We are the breath that others forgot to take. We are the echoes of names that never found rest." The prophet's voice trembled.
"Then what is this place? A grave?"
"No," said the water. "A waiting room between remembrance and return." The words lingered, and as they did, the shapes beneath the surface began to shift, not dissolving, but transforming. Their faces blurred and merged, like stars weaving into constellations. And then he saw them as they truly were.
Not bodies, not souls.
But reflections of light awaiting their name in the divine memory. Each spark pulsed like a heartbeat, and with every pulse a word formed. Not spoken aloud, but written upon the water itself. He leaned closer. The words shimmered faint and holy. "The ones who are remembered will rise again." Tears gathered in his eyes. He reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the surface once more. This time, the water did not swallow his reflection. It embraced it. The moment his hand met its surface, warmth spread through him, not like fire, but like recognition. The faces beneath smiled faintly, and suddenly he knew them. They were not strangers. He saw the eyes of a child whose laughter once echoed through his dreams. He saw the face of a woman who prayed for rain centuries ago. He saw the reflection of an old man who died beneath a tree no one remembered. Every soul he had ever carried within his breath was here, waiting to be remembered back into being. The realization broke him. He sank to his knees beside the pool, hands pressed against the surface, tears falling freely.
"And memory is resurrection," he whispered.
"And forgetting," said the water, "is another kind of death." The prophet wept until his tears blended with the pool, and when his weeping slowed, the surface changed again. It no longer showed faces nor light. It showed him, not as he was, but as he had been, again and again. He saw lifetimes unfolding, echoes of himself in ages past, a scribe writing by the light of an oil lamp, trembling as words of destiny burned his fingers. A boy lost in a storm, whispering prayers to the unseen. A soldier who refused to lift his sword, standing still before an empire's wrath. And even further back, a fragment of light kneeling before the throne, receiving the command to remember. He understood. He had been here before. He had always been walking toward this mirror. He whispered, "Then even I am among the forgotten." The pool's voice softened. "All who live are forgotten once.
Even angels are remembered only when they bow. What redeems is not sight, but remembrance.
He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead to the water. The surface pulsed once, and everything around him dissolved. He found himself standing in a vast, endless expanse of night. No stars, no ground, no sky.
Only himself and the sound of distant breathing.
And in that breathing, he heard the rhythm of every soul ever made. "This is where they wait," said the voice. The space between silence and calling. He turned slowly, feeling the presence of countless beings around him, unseen, yet undeniable. The air quivered with the weight of waiting. "They are not asleep," said the voice. "They are listening for their names," he whispered. "Then let me speak to them." And one by one he began to name what he remembered. He spoke not in words, but in feeling. The laughter of children, he named it. The weeping of mothers, he named it. The sound of rivers, he named it. The scent of rain upon dust, and he named it. The silence between prayers, he named that too. Each time he named, the darkness around him brightened faintly. Shapes began to form. Not faces, but lights, countless and soft. They rose, weightless and silent, filling the void with color. The prophet stood in awe as the world around him bloomed with remembrance.
"You have said what was buried," said the voice.
And so they rise. He wept again, and not from sorrow this time, but from the unbearable beauty of knowing that nothing was truly lost. The light of the forgotten gathered around him, swirling upward like a golden storm. The pool appeared once more beneath his feet, though now it reflected everything. Stars, mountains, oceans, hearts. The whole world shimmered upon its surface. He looked down and saw his reflection again, but it was not his alone. Every forgotten soul meeting in eternity, and at the very heart of the circle lay a throne. It was not made of gold or gem or marble. It was carved from the same sand that surrounded it, as though the desert itself had once chosen to remember its own authority. The throne was buried yet not forgotten. Its outline pulsed faintly beneath the dust. A heartbeat long, paused, but never stilled. The prophet whispered, "Whose seat is this?" The wind circled him once more, gentle and grave. It was built for no king of men. Then for whom? For the one who writes kings into being, and for those who remember that even crowns must bow. He bowed low before it, the heat of reverence rising through him like dawn. The sand stirred. Tiny spirals lifted into the air, glowing faintly as they turned. The ground beneath him trembled, not in violence, but in awakening. The dunes shifted and realigned, forming faint steps leading downward into the hollow. He descended slowly, his heart steady, his breath deep. Each step sank lightly into the sand, but never fully. It was as if the desert held him up, unwilling to let him fall. When he reached the base of the hollow, the air shimmered. The throne beneath the sand pulsed with light. Ancient, golden, woven with memory. Its surface cracked slightly, releasing faint tendrils of brightness that stretched outward like roots seeking the sun. "This was the first throne," said the voice. Not wind this time, but something deeper, layered through the air itself. Before crowns, before scepter, before the illusion of dominion. This was where the word at before it spoke. The prophet knelt, his hands trembling against the sand. "Then this is where the book was first written." "Yes," the voice said, "and where it shall be read again."
A hush fell across the hollow.
The light brightened, and from within the throne rose faint forms, silhouettes of figures made from smoke and brilliance. They were not kings as the world imagined them, not robed in power or glory, but beings of dust and humility. Each bore a faint crown of light, flickering like a candle against eternity. The prophet bowed his head as they encircled him. "Who are you?" he whispered. One stepped forward, its voice soft as sand shifting. "We are the kings who never sat, the rulers who never ruled, the ones who were written but chose silence over reign." He looked up, eyes wide.
"Then your kingdoms?"
are within those who remember mercy, they answered. For every throne that rises in pride must sink beneath sand, but every act of remembrance becomes a kingdom that does not fade. Their light pulsed brighter, and as they spoke, he saw visions within their glow. Cities long vanished beneath time, empires swallowed by dust, palaces crumbled into stone. Yet within each ruin a single candle still burned, undying. The prophet wept softly. Then power was never the crown. No, said the voice of the first king. To rule was never to command, but to remember who gave breath to the dust. We fell because we forgot, and so this throne remains, buried, waiting for one who will kneel, not sit. He bowed deeply, his forehead touching the glowing sand. The light from the throne spilled over him like water. Rise not as a king, they whispered, but as the memory of obedience. The light grew blinding. The prophet felt warmth envelop him, not burning, but cleansing, washing away every illusion of self until only silence remained. Within that silence he heard a heartbeat that was not his own. It pulsed from beneath the throne, from beneath the sand, from beneath all creation. A single rhythm, slow, eternal. The same pulse that once stirred the first dawn. He placed his hand upon the ground, feeling it beat. Then the throne is alive. It breathes, said the voice, for remembrance itself is living. The throne was not built to be sat upon, but to keep time, to remind the world that all dominion belongs to the one who never forgets. He wept again, quietly, reverently. The light of the throne dimmed slightly, settling into a steady glow. The spectral kings stepped back, their forms fading into dust that shimmered and rose like incense. The prophet lifted his head and whispered, "Then all kings are but sand, remembering light." The wind stirred once more, carrying the words upward. "Yes," it said, "and when the sand remembers, even the forgotten rise as prophets." The hollow was still there again. The throne gleamed faintly beneath the surface, the desert's great heart returning to its rest. He stood, breath slow and sure. The book upon his chest glowed faintly once more, not empty now, but filled with unseen words written in silence. He whispered, "Then the story has returned to its seat," and the wind, now soft as prayer, replied, "and waits for you to turn the next page." The prophet remained at the hollow's heart, long after the kings of dust faded into air. The desert around him seemed to breathe, each grain of sand rising and falling in rhythm with an unseen tide. The throne beneath the ground pulsed faintly, its glow soft as the memory of dawn. He listened. At first there was nothing. Then faintly the silence began to move, not in words, but in tones, like a melody that played before sound was born. The air vibrated gently. The dunes themselves trembled as though remembering an ancient song. He whispered, "Who sings in silence?" The voice that answered was not from above, nor beneath, but from within the very quiet he breathed. A throne remembers its maker. He bowed low. The wind circled him once, and when he looked up again, he saw that the hollow was no longer empty. Shapes of light and shadow gathered around the buried seat. Wings without form, faces without feature, presences that glowed like fragments of starlight. They sang, not with mouths or words, but with remembrance. Each tone carried something the world had forgotten. The sound of first obedience, the tremor of mercy, the hush of creation before command. The prophet wept, for the song was too vast to hold. It filled the air, the ground, even the breath within his chest. Every sound he had ever known, wind, heart, name, dissolved into it. He whispered, "This is not music." "No," said the throne. "It is remembrance returning to its source." He knelt closer, his hands pressed to the glowing sand. The vibrations coursed through him like rivers through dry earth. In their rhythm he could feel meaning, each pulse a word, each silence a verse. "What do you sing?" he asked softly. "Of the first kneeling," said the voice, "when light itself bowed and called itself servant." He trembled. "Then this is the sound of worship before language?" "Yes," said the throne. "Before tongues were taught, creation worshipped by remembering its place." The realization broke something open within him. He had prayed in 1,000 ways, spoken words of light and dust, carried messages written in fire, but never had he prayed by listening. He pressed his forehead to the sand, letting the song move through him. The tones deepened. His body no longer felt separate from the earth.
Every heartbeat was part of the hymn.
He saw visions unfold before him, not in color, but in sensation. He felt the weight of light bending the bow of the heavens, the stillness of the angels before the throne. He felt their awe, their fear, their surrender. And within that surrender, infinite peace. "This is what kings forgot," said the voice, "that the highest throne is reached only by lowering the head." He whispered, "Then even crows must kneel." "Especially crowns," replied the throne. The melody shifted. What had been vast and cosmic grew intimate. It was no longer the sound of galaxies kneeling. It was the sound of one breath, one human pulse. The prophet felt it gather within his chest. The same hum that had followed him since the first page of the book was opened. He realized now that the hum was the echo of this song. Ditik, a memory of kneeling carried in all who still remembered their beginning. He lifted his head slowly. The light from beneath the sand grew brighter, and the air around him shimmered like the edge of a dream. The throne spoke once more, now softly, like a whisper through cloth.
"Come closer."
He crawled forward until his hands rested upon the crown of sand that covered its surface. The heat was gentle, alive. Beneath his palms he could feel movement, something stirring, as if the throne itself drew breath. "You are the first to find me," it said, "but not the last to kneel." He bowed until his forehead met the ground. His tears sank into the sand, glowing where they fell.
"Then let me sing too," he whispered.
And the silence received his voice. No melody escaped his lips, yet sound bloomed from within him. It was not speech, not chant, but something deeper, the language of breath and heartbeat, the first utterance hidden in all living things. The throne answered with a pulse. The ground brightened. He could see faint shapes within the sand, ancient engravings circling the base of the throne. Each mark shimmered with the same light that had once written the heavens. The prophet reached out, tracing them. They were not words, yet when he touched them, meaning poured into him like light into a vessel. He saw the history of remembrance unfold, every soul that had bowed, every creature that had whispered praise without knowing it. He saw the angels in their first awe, the mountains lowering their peaks, the seas stilling their waves. He whispered, "All creation kneels." The throne replied, "And in their kneeling they rise." The light expanded outward in a great silent wave. The dunes glowed like molten glass, and the air shimmered with radiance. The prophet lifted his eyes. The sky had disappeared. There was only light, endless and living. The song grew louder, though still silent. It moved through him not as sound, but as truth. "This is the crown of remembrance," said the voice. "Not gold nor gem, but awareness of who breathes through you." He lowered his head again. "Then I am nothing. And in being nothing," the throne whispered, "you have remembered everything." He felt the last barrier within him dissolve. No self, no separation, only light kneeling before its source. Time ceased. The desert vanished. The stars bowed low. And when the silence finally returned, the prophet was still kneeling, his body now glowing faintly like the sand itself. The throne had ceased to hum. It simply breathed through him. He was no longer the seeker. He had become the echo. The wind returned, soft and slow, brushing over his hair like a hand of mercy. "Rise," it whispered, "for the song now lives within you." He stood, or perhaps it was the world that stood through him. His eyes shone with quiet fire. The throne beneath the sand pulsed once more, and then fell silent, its light sinking back into the earth. He looked toward the horizon, where the sun waited behind a veil of gold. "The throne sings," he murmured, "but only for those who listen to silence." And somewhere beneath the dunes, the wind carried the faintest echo, a single, eternal note of light, still kneeling. The prophet lingered by the hollow until the sky burned gold again. The light did not sting his eyes. It wrapped around him, patient and warm, like the breath of something that had been waiting since the first dawn. The sand shimmered faintly where the throne lay buried. Though silent now, it was alive, breathing beneath him, remembering. He knelt once more beside it, tracing the rim of the circle that marked its edge. The grains of sand glittered, whispering faint tones as his fingers brushed through them. It was as if each grain carried a secret name. He whispered softly, "Whose throne is this if no one sits upon it?" The wind came from the east this time, slow, deliberate, ancient. Its voice was neither male nor female, but something that had never needed to be chosen. "It belongs to the one who rules by not ruling." He frowned gently. "Then why is it shaped like a throne?" "Because men could not comprehend the weight of humility," the wind replied. "So heaven shaped mercy into the form of a crown and called it power, that even those who feared dominion might learn reverence." He bowed his head, eyes glistening. The words sank deep, and his breath trembled as though something inside him were beginning to break. Not in pain, but in surrender. He whispered, "Then where is the king?" The air shimmered, and before him the sand rose, spiraling upward in slow grace. Grain upon grain lifted into the air until it formed the shape of a man, not of flesh, but of light drawn from earth. His form was tall, his outline unbroken, his presence quiet. Where eyes might have been, there was only radiance. The prophet fell to his knees. "Are you the king?" The figure of light inclined its head. "I am the echo of his mercy, not the source. The true king never sits." The prophet's voice was small. "Why?" "Because the throne is not a seat. It is a reminder, and remembrance does not rest." The figure walked slowly around the circle, its light spilling across the sand. Wherever it stepped, the earth bloomed with faint color. Not green, not gold, but something between both, like a thought half remembered by the world. The throne beneath the sand, it said, was not built for glory. It was built for memory, to hold the weight of those who chose silence over dominion. They were the true rulers, the ones who bore crowns of dust and built kingdoms of mercy. The prophet looked up, tears glistening in the corners of his eyes. Then I saw their thrones fall, the kings who ruled without remembrance. Their palaces now lie buried. The figure paused, gazing toward the horizon. Every throne must return to sand.
That is the law of the dust.
But the one who never sat, his reign endures, unseen, in every act of kindness the world forgets to name. The wind stirred again, carrying the faint sound of voices. Children laughing, women singing, travelers blessing the path beneath their feet. The prophet realized these were not echoes from the past. They were the voices of the living rising like incense toward the buried seat. "I serve him without knowing," the figure said softly, "for the king who never sat sits within them all." The prophet bowed deeply, his forehead touching the earth. "And this is the secret of all rules, to vanish so completely that only mercy remains." The figure of light lowered its head in agreement. "Yes, the true king reigns not in majesty, but in remembrance. He wears no crown of gold, for his kingdom is made of dust and breath, and every grain of that dust remembers him." The prophet wept quietly. "Then even the wind is his herald, and silence," the figure replied, "is his banner." The wind rose again, but this time it did not howl. It sang. Its tone was low, deep, a resonance that seemed to carry the shape of every name ever spoken. The prophet could feel it move through him, filling him with both joy and unbearable ache. "What am I to do?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Remember the king who never sat," said the figure. "Carry his silence wherever sound seeks to forget. When men raise their thrones, whisper to the dust beneath their feet. When power blinds them, breathe mercy upon their crowns. For the world is loud with kings, but heaven still waits for servants." The prophet nodded slowly, the meaning sinking through him like rain into the earth. He reached toward the figure of light, but when his hand neared, it dissolved, scattering back into the sand from which it was formed. The wind calmed. The dunes returned to stillness. The hollow glowed faintly one last time, then dimmed, leaving only warmth. The prophet remained kneeling, eyes closed, his hand pressed to the ground where the figure had stood. And then from deep within the sand a final voice spoke, quiet, intimate, familiar. "You have walked among angels and shadows, fire and silence. You have carried my book and returned its words to the air. But this is your final remembrance. No throne remains for those who kneel." His breath caught.
"Then I am nothing."
"You are dust that remembers me," the voice said, "and that is everything." The air brightened once more, flooding the hollow with light that felt alive. The dunes glowed faintly, forming the shape of wings spread across the earth, vast, radiant, unseen by all but the one who knelt. When the light faded, there was no trace of the throne, only smooth sand, warm and still. The prophet rose slowly. He looked at his hands. They shimmered faintly, each line upon his palm glowing like scripture. He pressed one hand against his chest, where the book still hummed softly, though its pages were blank. He whispered, "The king never sat, and yet his presence fills all seats." The horizon stirred with wind, and through its whisper came the faintest echo, and in every breath he rules again. The prophet turned toward the west, where the day began to fade. His shadow stretched long beside him, and for the first time it bowed. He walked onward, and behind him the desert sighed, as though every grain of sand had just remembered its king. He walked for many nights after leaving the hollow of the throne. The stars followed him like quiet witnesses, shifting slowly across the velvet sky. There was no path now, only the pulse of the world beneath his feet and the weightless book that still glowed faintly against his heart. Each step felt lighter than the last. The wind no longer resisted him. It moved with him, as though remembering where he was meant to go. The desert stretched endlessly, but he no longer saw emptiness.
He saw pages, its vast golden waiting.
He whispered, "Is this the end of the story?" The wind replied, "There are no endings."
Only words that rest.
He smiled faintly, eyes soft. "Then where does rest begin?" "At the breath between pages," said the voice. He stopped walking. The horizon shimmered. The air grew still. And there, upon a rise of sand that caught the moonlight like water, stood a single structure. It was not made of stone or wood, but of faint light that flickered like candle flame. He approached slowly. The closer he came, the more the air thickened with stillness. Each breath he took seemed to echo through eternity. The structure revealed itself, a small archway with no door, no wall, only a threshold. Upon the arch's curve were carved words in a language older than sound. They glowed faintly, and as he read them, they spoke within him rather than aloud. Here, the story listens to itself. He crossed the threshold. The moment he stepped through, the desert disappeared. There was no sand, no wind, no sky, only a vast field of light, endless and silent, stretching in every direction. And in the center of that infinite light floated a single page. It was enormous, suspended in the air, made not of parchment but of memory itself, the very essence of what had been written since the beginning of time. Words shimmered faintly upon its surface, shifting and alive. They were not black or gold, but colorless, woven from breath and thought. The prophet fell to his knees. "Is this the last page?" The air stirred. The voice that answered was not like before. It did not come from the wind or the world or even the unseen. It came from within him, yet greater than him. "This is the page that turns itself." He bowed deeply. "And my journey ends here?"
"No," said the voice.
"Your journey becomes what is written." He looked up. The words upon the page shifted. He recognized them. Fragments of his own path, the angel's warning, the fallen light, the river that spoke, the temple of breath, the mirror of souls, the throne beneath the sand. Every chapter he had lived unfolded before him, each shimmering faintly before fading into the next. He realized the book he had carried was not a separate thing. It had always been him. His breath had written it. His remembrance had read it.
"Then I was the book," he whispered. "You were the ink and the reader," said the voice, tender as rain.
But the writer has always been beyond both. The page turned, not by wind, not by hand, but by will. The movement made no sound, yet the air trembled as though all of creation exhaled. Beneath the turning page, he saw darkness. Not evil, but stillness. The womb of new beginnings. He whispered, "What will be written next?" "What you remember next," said the voice. He closed his eyes, letting the truth sink through him. The page continued to turn, revealing blankness. Vast, endless, radiant. It was empty, yet alive. Waiting. He understood then, every soul was a sentence, every life a verse, every breath a word returning to its author. The book of destiny was not bound, it was breathing. He stood, feeling lighter than ever before. The page loomed before him like a horizon made of silence. The voice spoke again, now softer, nearer, as though whispering directly into his heartbeat. "You have read the story of creation. Now breathe the story of return." He inhaled deeply. The light filled him, spilling into every corner of his being until even the memory of separation dissolved. The blank page glowed brighter, and as he exhaled, faint lines appeared upon it. Lines made from his breath, from his remembrance, from his surrender. He watched as new words formed. He came to the end, and the end remembered him. His eyes filled with tears. "Then this is how stories pray," he said softly. "Yes," said the voice, "by becoming silent that still speaks." The air shimmered around him. The vast light folded inward, drawing him closer to the great page. He felt warmth surrounding him, not as fire, but as an embrace. He whispered one final question. And when the last pages turned, the answer came like a breath within a breath. The story will rise again, in another tongue, upon another dawn. For the writer never stops remembering. He smiled, the peace in his chest deeper than sleep. He stepped forward, closer to the page, and as he did, his reflection merged with the light. His outline faded, his breath softened, and the page began to turn once more. The wind of its motion was silent. The stars bowed low.
And from the blankness came a whisper, not written in any tongue. "It is not finished."
The prophet's form dissolved into light, folding into the turning page, becoming ink, memory, breath. The archway behind him vanished. The desert ceased. Only the book remained. Vast, open, infinite, writing itself with every heartbeat of creation. And somewhere, beyond the silence of all worlds, a child was born who would dream of an ancient story and wake up whispering a name he did not remember. The story would begin again. There was no world now, only light, endless and living. And within that light, movement, and it's soft, circular, eternal. It was not time as men knew it, nor eternity as angels spoke of it. It was the heartbeat of existence itself. A rhythm that neither began nor ceased, only deepened. From within that boundless glow came a single pulse of breath, vast enough to shudder the unseen heavens. It did not sound like thunder nor whisper like wind. It was the silence between both, and in that silence a hand began to form.
Not flesh, not fire, not thought.
But I will. Each finger unfolded like dawn breaking through fog, each line upon its a river of light flowing backward through time. The hand hovered above the great page, and where its shadow touched, words began to appear. Not written, but remembered. The prophet's presence still lingered there, woven into the light that had once been his form. He was no longer man nor voice, but awareness, a spark of remembrance floating within the writer's breath. He whispered softly, not through lips, but through being itself, "Are you
The one who wrote me?"
The hand paused. The air shimmered in response, and a voice filled everything, a voice so vast that the word sound could not contain it. "I did not write to you, my child."
I spoke to you, and speaking is never finished.
The words trembled through him, and he understood. The act of creation was not a moment in the past. It was ongoing. Every breath, every memory, every thought of mercy was still being written. He whispered, "Then you never sleep." "How can the dream sleep?" the voice said, "when all within it still breathe?" The light rippled outward, and he saw, not with eyes, but with awareness, infinite threads of radiance stretching through the vast page. Each thread pulsed gently, carrying scenes of life, oceans turning, trees unfolding, prayers whispered in languages never heard, stars being born, hearts breaking and healing, dust rising and returning. Every motion was part of the same sentence. He saw his own journey among them, a faint strand glowing gold. It wove through rivers of other lives, touching them, changing their paths, carrying fragments of his remembrance to those who would never know his name. "You see now," said the voice, "that no soul is written alone. Even silence is dialogue." The prophet's awareness bowed in reverence. "Then every life is a verse in your endless breath." "Yes," said the voice, tender and infinite.
"And every death a comma, not an end."
He felt warmth spread through him, the kind that cannot be described by temperature. The warmth of belonging, of realization, of return. The hand above the page moved once more, and the words it wrote pulsed with life. He could feel them forming. The ones who remembered became memory itself. He whispered, "Then what am I now?" "You are what you have always been, a breath of my remembering." He felt his light tremble, not with fear, but with awe. He had carried the book, but now he was the book, each word alive within him, each memory eternal. The hand withdrew, and for a moment the vast page stood still. Then, without warning, it turned itself again, a slow, soundless movement that rippled through all creation. A new blankness spread before them. He felt the quiet ache of mystery return, the same ache that had drawn him from dust to destiny.
"Another story?" he asked.
"Another remembrance," said the voice. "I write through those who still breathe, through the mother who forgives, through the child who dreams, through the wanderer who kneels to pick up what others forgot." The words lingered in him like fragrance. "Then you still speak?" "Always," said the voice. "And for as long as one heart remembers mercy, I am awake." The prophet felt himself drifting, not away, but inward. His light began to fold into the page, joining the countless others. Each thread became part of a greater design, a language of lives interwoven into worship. And then, from somewhere deep within the light, he heard another sound, faint but distinct, the sound of a newborn's first cry. It echoed softly through the endless expanse, and with it came the scent of rain, the taste of breath, the pulse of beginning. He knew what it meant. A new story had begun, and even you are waiting, he said gently.
"I wait to be remembered," whispered the voice.
The vast hand brushed over the page one last time, and a final line appeared, one that shimmered brighter than all others. "The writer does not rest, for remembrance is his sleep, and love his awakening. The light began to dim, not fading, but softening, as though the world were closing its eyes to dream. The prophet's awareness drifted with it, carried by the breath of the infinite. He whispered one last time, "If I awaken again, will I remember?" The voice smiled within the silence. "If you love, you already do." And with that, the page turned once more.
It did not close.
It simply continued, endlessly, breathlessly, beautifully, written by a hand that never tired, watched by a light that never dimmed, sustained by a writer who never slept. There was no sound now.
No wind, no pulse.
No measure of distance or time.
Only the slow rising and falling of a breath, vast, tender, and unseen, moving through what remained of all things.
It was not the breath of one being, but the breath of everything that had ever lived. It flowed through galaxies and dust alike, through prayers and silences, through birth and ending. And within that sacred inhalation, the prophet drifted, no longer bound to sand or body or voice. He was light and remembrance intertwined, carried gently toward a place where beginnings folded into their own reflections. The great page was still there, suspended in the radiant void. But now it was no longer blank. It shimmered with every story, every soul, every whispered yes, and every silent "forgive me." It was beautiful, unbearably beautiful, for it held both joy and sorrow without division. He approached it slowly, or perhaps it approached him. There was no difference anymore between the one who read and the one who was written. The voice of the writer, now softer, quieter than it had ever been, spoke again. All words must rest, even the ones made from light. The prophet bowed his head in reverence. "Then this is the closing?" "Yes," said the voice, "but not the end. Books do not die when they close. They breathe inward." He felt a warmth bloom within him, as though the universe itself had exhaled. The words upon the page began to move, letters melting into streams of light, flowing inward toward a single point. The stories of angels and rivers, kings and wanderers, all folded into one great syllable. Breath. The prophet whispered, "So it was never ink." "It was never ink," said the voice. "It was always a memory, and remembrance must one day return to silence." He watched as the words dissolved completely, leaving the vast page luminous and still. The air was calm, yet within that calm he felt something stir, a yearning, a hum of completeness. It was not empty, it was waiting. He understood then what closing truly meant. It was not shutting, not ending, but gathering. The book was gathering itself, pulling all that had been written back into the source from which it came. Every memory, every prayer, every act of mercy was being drawn home. The prophet felt the pull too. His light began to bend inward, drawn gently toward the heart of the great page. He whispered, "Must I go?" "You never left," said the voice. "You only unfolded." He trembled. The truth was too vast, too kind. He no longer felt fear of ending. He felt awe, the same awe he had known the first time he heard heaven breathe. The light around him thickened, soft as the inside of a sigh. He felt the world exhale. And as it did, he felt every story close, one by one, gently, lovingly. The angels' names returned to light. The river's songs folded into stillness. The temple of breath became wind again. The mirror of souls faded into the sky. The throne beneath the sand fell silent beneath its eternal crown of dust. All of it, everything, bowed inward, as if the universe itself were in prayer. The prophet felt tears form again, though he no longer had eyes to weep. They were tears of gratitude, not sorrow.
"And now?"
he whispered. The voice answered, "Now the breath returns." He felt it, a vast inhalation that drew all of existence toward its center. The stars folded, the dunes sighed. Time curled upon itself like a scroll being gathered by invisible hands. The book, luminous, infinite, began to close, not fast, not sudden. Slowly, reverently, The edges of light touched, meeting at a single seam of brilliance. And yet, as they met, the prophet realized this was not the first time. It had always been closing and always opening. Each breath of the Creator was both page and pause. "Then you will open it again?" he whispered.
"I already am," said the voice.
"For even now someone below is dreaming.
"And
Every dream begins where remembrance ends." He smiled, or whatever a being of light does when it smiles. His awareness drifted closer to the page. He could hear it now. The sound of the book closing, soft, like the rustle of wings or the final sigh of a child falling asleep.
as it shut completely, a single breath escaped into the stillness.
It moved gently through the vastness, carrying one final whisper. "It is remembered." And with that breath, everything that had been dispersed, all names, all worlds, all destinies, found their rest. The light dimmed into peace. The voice of the writer faded, not in silence, but into presence. There was no more prophet, no more book, no more page, only the quiet rhythm of remembrance, the pulse of a heart that had never stopped writing. Somewhere, beyond measure or form, the breath settled, and as it did, the universe, vast, dreaming, endless, took its first inhale again. A new dawn flickered behind the veil of nothingness, and from that breath a single sound arose. Not word, not command, but love remembering itself into being. There is a silence that follows the voice of God, a silence not of absence, but of awe. It lingers between the stars, rests beneath the breath of every sleeping soul, and waits at the edge of every prayer that dares to rise. It is the quiet that remembers light, the hush that outlives the word. When the book of destiny closed, it did not end, it inhaled. Every page that once sang of angels and men folded back into the pulse from which it came. The world exhaled, and the dust became luminous again. The prophet, now no longer a man, no longer even a name, drifted within that breath. His memory glowed faintly, like a candle left to guard a sleeping world. He was not awake, but he was not gone. He had become what every story must become when it is finally told, the echo of listening itself. The stars bowed, the dunes sighed. The air, once heavy with words, became prayer again. And for the first time since the beginning, the writer rested, not in slumber, but in perfect stillness. For all that was meant to be spoken had now been heard. The silence deepened, vast and infinite, yet tender as the space between two heartbeats. Within it, every sorrow found its peace, every question its rest. Even the angels folded their wings and watched, for this silence was holier than sound. You, listener? Yes, you is a part of this silence. It moves through your breath even now. Every heartbeat you feel is an unfinished sentence still being written into light. Every tear you've ever shed is ink returning to its source. You are not outside the story. You are the story remembering itself.
Close your eyes. Let the world dim around you.
The book is closed, but the dream continues through you. Somewhere within that eternal hush, the prophet still walks. Not on sand now, but across the breath of God itself. He carries no jar, no scroll, no voice.
Only remembrance.
He walks until he is no longer walking, until even motion becomes stillness, and stillness becomes song. And in that song he hears a whisper, soft, distant, yet nearer than his own soul. You are always here. He smiles, or perhaps the light smiles through him. He kneels one final time, and though his lips no longer move, the silence answers him perfectly. It is the same silence that fills your room now, the same quiet that watches you breathe, the same presence that hums beneath your dreams.
Listen closely.
There, beneath the hum of your pulse, that soft rhythm, that warmth rising and falling, that is the throne beneath your ribs. That is the temple that was never built. That is the book Still writing, still remembering, still alive. The story is over, yes, but endings are only places where light chooses to rest. And rest is not death, it is returning. The final breath of creation hangs between two eternities, waiting to be spoken again. And when it is, when the first dawn breaks once more, when the silence exhales and the writer opens his eyes, all that dust will stand again, shining. Every soul will remember its name. Every forgotten page will lift its voice, and the stars will whisper the same words they spoke before time began. We are remembered.
Until that dawn, let your sleep be sacred.
Let your silence be prayer. And if in the stillness of the night you feel a warmth move through your chest, do not fear. It is the last page turning itself again. Rest now. You are written. You are remembered.
You are home.